Hey everyone, Amia here from Resonance Astrology, and I'm joined today by Aid. Say hi.
Hello, hello.
Hey, so we are recording Saturn moving into Aries horoscopes today for each sign. And this is a transit that's coming up very soon. So Saturn moves into Aries next weekend, which is what date exactly? It's 25th. I guess depending on where you're living, one day before, one day after, but around 25th of May, Saturn is finally making its monumental ingress into the sign of Aries. So there's completely new, different energy we are working with now. And the way we are going to structure this video is essentially we are kind of going to talk a bit about the archetype of Saturn, then the archetype of Aries, and we're also going to talk a bit about like Saturn and Neptune together since this transit essentially is just so linked to both of them coming together. So there's no way to not talk about Neptune as well here. We're going to mention some collective themes. And yeah, after that, we're going to go into horoscopes. The timestamps are in the description below. So if you're impatient, which we get, that's kind of Saturn and Aries, you can skip ahead, but we definitely encourage you to also listen to the beginning part because it's going to give you just like a feel from a more like archetypal perspective on how things are going to play out. And everything we're talking about in the beginning is what we are going to use to then, like, it will probably make more sense to listen to your horoscope after you heard us talk about these things. So I think that's important to mention. Exactly. And that's kind of how we're gonna structure this video today. Is there something you want to add? Is there something I forgot?
No, I think you got it all.
Okay, great. So, to get into some of the more basic things, as I already said, next Sunday, Saturn is moving into the sign of Aries. Obviously, like most planets, Saturn is going to have a retrograde period as well. It's going to re enter or like go back into Pisces, so to say. So we're not quite yet finished with our Piscean Saturnian stories in our lives yet. But things are definitely like coming into a close right now. And I think a lot of people have also been feeling Saturn sitting at that 29 degrees of Pisces for like the last week or so. And then on around September, or wait, how did you final re-entry into Pisces September 1st, 2025? Oh, yeah, sorry, that's when it re-enters Pisces again, right? And then on, or what did you want to say? Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, so it's going to be in Aries through February of, no, through September 1st
Mhm.
this year. Then from September 1st through February 13th of 2026, it's going to be in Pisces again. And then at the end of that February, it'll officially be in Aries through 2028 or through February 2028. So the entire transit's about 2.5 years. But there
Yes.
will be that small segment where we go back into Pisces just to clean up that Pisces sector, and then we're done. And then mutable signs can chill.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah, and I think what is also important to mention here is that we have been getting that like that sector in our charts wherever the last 10 degrees of Pisces are in your chart and that first 10 degrees of Aries has already undergone like the Mercury retrograde and the Venus retrograde. So it's something we're already kind of familiar and we've been working with. Now Saturn and Neptune are also doing its thing there. It's taking a bit longer to happen there, but I do think that's just important to mention. Like it's no themes are like completely new. Like we have already gotten a bit of a taste of what that ingress into Aries is gonna feel like. So I think that's also important to mention here. Yeah, also interesting day. I was just like, oh wow, so that's it's gonna be an interesting Valentine's Day next year, I guess, with Saturn re-entering Aries there again. And as you already mentioned, Saturn stays in a sign for about 2.5 years, so it's around February 2028 till that we have Saturn in the sign of Aries. Um, any other important dates to mention or
No, I think exactly what you said. The Mercury and Venus, sorry, retrogrades in March and April of 2025 went through the first few degrees of Aries where Saturn will be entering this year. So whatever came up there, any conflicts and things that got resolved, that transit almost cleared the way for now Saturn to enter. So just thinking about like the things that got revised in your life those 2 months, things that got changed, and now there'll be new structure, new things developing over the next few years in that area. So, yeah,
yeah, that's good. That's a good keyword for like the next segment of the archetypes of Saturn. Do you want to carry it or
sure, yeah. So Saturn um, has a lot of meanings, but Saturn, it's maturity, it's responsibility, it's building structure and discipline through challenges. Usually, what Saturn does is it has an initial feeling of limitations or restrictions or boundaries that you feel kind of imposed on you that therefore require you um, to develop more maturity, more responsibility, to be more disciplined. Um, any kind of long-term growth is done through short-term sacrifice, and that's really what Saturn rules, is sacrificing short-term um, pleasures and like immediate gratification for long-term um, growth. Um, and sometimes that means you kind of there can be this feeling of like, oh, like all of a sudden there's all these rules and all these limitations I'm not used to. Or it can be, oh, suddenly like I'm reaping the rewards of my long-term
Mhm,
sacrifices.
mhm.
So Saturn isn't inherently punishing, it's actually teaching you. Saturn is a good teacher. It's a parent, it's the father, um, it's the boss. It's the person who's saying, no, you can't do this. This is what you can and can't do. And then it's up to you to respond, okay, how am I going to make the most of these limitations and these conditions so that I can use these rules to actually create a foundation that serves me in the long term. And that's my spiel on Saturn. Would you add anything?
Yeah, that's I mean definitely all the keywords that I would totally add there as well. I think what most people or why people are scared or have like a problem, so to say, with Saturn is we often refer to Saturn as like the Lord of Karma. For me, karma is something very simple. Like the simplest way I can explain it is reaction to action. You're getting a reaction to an action you have taken, and that's the consequences, which can be pleasant or unpleasant. But when it's something that like we know we've done and like now the consequences are coming, which are not so pleasant, well, that's what most people kind of dislike about Saturn. Um, and I think Saturn also has a lot to do with I think both. Like there's one part where it's like kind of overcoming, or as you said, like making the best of what you have. Another part of Saturn also, I think, has a lot to do with acceptance, like accepting the real limitations or things, because once you do, like your current state can become just like it's just a base for so many other opportunities, but you have to kind of like accept the limitations first. And like when you do that, then a lot of things can happen. I mean, Saturn at the end, like if we look at the symbol, we don't have the glyph here right now, but it looks like a sickle, which has a lot to do with harvest. And so Saturn has a lot to do with agriculture. And we all know agriculture, like everybody that has a garden has ever been around plants, know that they take time, effort, and care. And especially if you're building like a larger garden, it takes years to, grow into full fruition. So there is just this time quality with Saturn. So a lot of patience also that gets associated with Saturn, which we're going to talk about this later, is something that Saturn and Aries particularly kind of struggles with, since it's a more like impatient sign. But just talking about Saturn like that, I think what a lot of people also fail to realize often is that Saturn creates purpose. Like if we didn't have Saturn, our life wouldn't really have any purpose. That's a big thing to throw out there. I think every planet is purposeful, but just because Saturn rules over time and like the ending of time, the fact that like eventually there's gonna be an end, like we're gonna leave this body that we are inhabiting. Saturn like kind of puts us in the rut where we're like, but what are you gonna do with that time that you have left here? Like, what is the purpose of that time you have left here? And so I guess that's what I want to add here. Is there anything you want to riff off of what I said?
Yeah, I think death, Saturn does rule death in a lot of
True. Yeah.
ways,
Decay.
and decay. And I think I think of also because Saturn is traditionally connected to, like you said, agriculture and the land. And if you think about like working with nature, like nature has finite resources.
Mm.
You are working within the limitations of the soil that you're working with, the weather, like there are all of these rules that you have to follow. And a lot of gardening and agriculture is learning how to work around those rules,
It's true.
um, and accept the like limitations of the material conditions that you're working with. Saturn is also very material. So the kind of challenges it brings can be very much like I don't have the resources or the energy or the connections to do this thing that I want to do. And I have to be more resourceful and more patient and put in more effort and wait. Um, and that's kind of the like patience part of Saturn. But yeah, thinking of about it like gardening, like there's so much work you do to create a farm before you actually see the first harvest. It's months and months of labor, and that's kind of what Saturn feels like. So when you have that perspective, a Saturn transit can feel so much lighter because it's like, okay, even if I'm going through a dark night of the soul and I have no energy and I don't see the purpose, you find the purpose through the work and through the progress of making daily steps over time, and enjoying the process. That becomes your purpose, and then the rewards are just kind of even more rewarding. So yeah, I think we covered Saturn pretty well. I guess we can talk about
Yeah.
Saturn and Aries. Um, I
Yeah.
can briefly say Saturn in an Aries is in the sign of its fall. Um, so, we have Saturn that likes time and patience and takes time to grow. And then we have Aries, which is about, I want this now. Like, I have this idea, it needs to be executed now. I need to act now. And so we have this paradox of wanting to act and realize things quickly, but then also needing to uh, deal with the material limitations and like the slowness that growth takes. Um, uh, yeah, I don't know. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I do. I have some just like from a like let's maybe talk or what I want to mention is like why is Saturn and its fall in the sign of Aries? Like definitely the things you mentioned there as well, but if we look at it from the perspective of dignities in the first place, because like there's a reason why or how they got created. A lot of Western astrology here is based on like the northern hemisphere. And so when we look at the seasons of nature or like the interplay of light and darkness, when spring comes, Aries rules over the spring equinox. It's when the sun or where the lightness takes over the darkness. So we are officially entering the light of the light part of the year. This is why the sun is exalted in the sign of Aries because like the sun does extremely well there, in a sign where like the light takes over, where the sun takes over and the days get longer than the nights. Saturn is like very oppositional to that energy. It's very like not that energy at all, which is why if we look at the sign opposite to Aries, which is Libra, where we have the opposite thing, Libra rules over the autumn equinox. It's where the darkness takes over. Saturn is exalted in the sign of Libra. The sun is in its fall. And we can clearly see that with like this interplay of like light and darkness and how it's happening. It just gives us a bit more insight into why Saturn would not do so well in this young and fresh sign that's all about like new beginnings and sprout. Like Saturn is literally more about like the end of life and things that take long term and not about a sign that like just came to fruition or the seeds that are like being planted. So I think that gives like a good perspective on like why is it in its fall there? Like why is Saturn in its fall in Aries?
Yeah, well said. Well said. Um, yeah, if there's anything else. I think also um Aries is about taking risks, and Saturn is about rejection, and Saturn often says no. And so when I think of Saturn and Aries, it's like learning to take risks and be willing to fail over and over again to then get like the results you want or get to where you want. But it takes a lot of a willingness to fail, to fall. Literally, Saturn is in its fall. So in order to make the most of it, you have to be willing to fall over and over again. And there's also, because Saturn is also tradition and more like following the rules, and Aries is about breaking rules and doing something new. Um, I think a lot of Saturn and Aries lessons will be about how we push up against authority, whether it be in our personal lives, in our careers, or I mean, it's going to look different for every sign, and we'll get to it, but how you work against tradition. And I almost think of Saturn and Aries as like learning the rules so that you can break them. Like if you want to break the rules, you at least have to really understand what the rules are and why they're there and what purpose they serve in the first place, because they're there for a reason. You can't just say like, oh, screw it all, like this is what I want to do. Like,
Yeah.
no, there's a foundation there that you can work with. And so, but it takes a lot of failure, and it takes a lot of um learning from failure. And that's something that Saturn is about too. So yeah.
Yeah, Saturn and Aries is definitely a lot about learning to stand up again and again because there's just a lot of pushback with Saturn in Aries because oftentimes you want to do things too soon. It's like this is just the best analogy that I popped into my head right now. Even though I'm like veggie, but whatever. Like when you put the turkey into the oven, like it takes a certain amount to cook it to like so that it tastes good. Saturn and Aries is like constantly like wanting to pull it out way before and like it's not gonna taste good if you do that. And is this impatient rush that Aries often has where it's like, no, let it simmer just a bit more. Like if you
Let it
take it
cook.
exactly let it cook. If you take it out too prematurely, it won't be good because it won't be ready. And so oftentimes Saturn and Aries folks or just everybody now that's gonna experience this transit is gonna like um kind of clash us with like where are we impatient, where are we taking out the metaphorical turkey way too soon, and like pushing us into fields where we just simply are not ready yet. What I also wanted to mention before, like Saturn rules over the opposition aspect, in terms of like aspects. That means that in an interesting way, Saturn actually kind of rules over extremes because Saturn can go like either this way or the other way. And we can often see that with like Saturn transits as well, where like if we take the example of responsibility, for example, Saturn and Aries could be like either not responsible at all, like I don't want to take any responsibility, like I just like YOLO, I just want to live my life, there's no tomorrow. And then on the other hand, there could be like taking responsibility way too soon and feeling like I'm the responsible person for everything, like I'm the sole one here. So it like Saturn rules over this interesting dichotomies and extremes in our own lives, and we might have to like learn to face these as well over this transit. Yeah. Is there something you want to
Yeah.
add to that?
I think exactly. I think there's usually just two manifestations of this. It's either you're taking way too many risks and you're being way
Yeah.
too reckless. And Saturn and Aries is going to be like, yo, slow down, like your actions have consequences. Or it'll be like you're way too comfortable, you're way too conservative, you're not taking risks because you're so scared of failure and you need to be okay with failure and, you know, taking more risks. And so, kind of finding and thinking about where you fall on that spectrum will give you an idea of like what to expect over the next couple years of like, is this a time where I need to kind of pull back a little bit and be a little more serious, or do I need to loosen up? Because sometimes Saturn transits is about the rules you have for yourself are way too hard. Loosen up a little bit and you'll get more rewards. I will also say, if you have a day chart, Saturn tends to be the latter, so it tends to be more rewarding and asking you to loosen up a little bit. If you were born at night, then Saturn can feel a little bit more restricting and more like, okay, um, I need to like learn this like energy of like maturity and like
Mm.
restriction and discipline. So, um, there's other factors of like where Saturn is in your own chart, um, but generally, like that's kind of the difference between day and night charts.
Yeah, that's
Is there
great. That's
anything?
good that you mentioned that. Yeah.
Is there anything else besides the other big thing about this ingress is that as Saturn enters Aries, it will immediately conjoin Neptune. And it's actually going to happen a few times over the next couple of years, but it'll have a pretty close aspect this summer. Do you think we're ready to talk about that?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I mean, it's like they're not coming fully together this year, like even though they're like
Right. They're
so
like
close.
really
They're
close.
like practically kissing, you know?
Yeah.
But like the exact conjunction is happening next year, but they've already been close in the sign of Pisces, like in an engagement range is what we call it. Um, and they're just getting closer and closer. And we definitely like we need to talk about this because it's just like it's so monumental. First of all, Saturn and Neptune generally coming together, like that does not happen the other day. That does not happen every other year. And so the fact that throughout the whole ingress and transit of Saturn in Aries, Neptune is also going to be there, even though, of course, when Saturn moves further along, they're not going to be super close. They're still going to be in the same sign. So, like, the whole Saturn and Aries transit is going to be marked by Neptune also being there. So I do think we have to talk about this. Yeah, do you want to?
Yeah, we have yet another paradox with Saturn
Yeah.
because Saturn is about boundaries and creating separation. And Neptune is about dissolving boundaries. Neptune is like accessing the collective unconscious, that oceanic feeling, that place where everything is connected and I am you and you are me. And that ability to see through the veil and through like beyond the separation of the physical and material realm, um, and seeing the connectedness of everything. And then Saturn is like, no, like there's, your job is this, your job is that. It's about like putting like material restrictions on things. And so when you combine these two, there's a lot of different ways it can manifest, but I feel like a few of them are, applying Saturn discipline to Neptune, to our spiritual, religious, philosophical, like beliefs and worldviews. So it might be like developing or crystallizing or becoming very clear on what your beliefs are, what your connection to the spiritual realm is. Um, uh, Neptune is also like how you show up for the collective, and how you're of service to others, because Neptune is also, in modern astrology, it's the ruler of Pisces. So it's also like looking out for like the underdog and the vulnerable. And so Saturn and Neptune is like putting in more effort to take care of other people and being of service to other people, especially people from different backgrounds than you, because Neptune is again, like there's no boundaries, there's no walls. So it could be people that are from completely different walks of life from you. You then like putting in more effort or dedication or taking on more responsibility to serving them. Um, and in general, like Neptune and Aries with Saturn, it kind of softens the blow of Saturn a little bit. It um, because Neptune kind of it'll soften the impact of Saturn, I'll say. Um, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that kind of that's the best way I can describe it. I
Yeah,
think
no,
you
it's
put it well, like it acts like a bomb.
yeah. Yeah, I just yeah, I feel like that's the best way that I can describe is like that
Hmm.
Neptune just like has this a bit like a soft balm it kind of just puts on planets there.
Hmm.
And so I do feel like it can potentially soften the blow of Saturn a bit. Neptune is also again it like has a veil which serves an interesting thing. And also, again, this dichotomy of like oppositions, which we can see in Neptune as well to a certain degree. It's like, in a way, it creates disillusion, it also creates illusion. So it's like, it can make Saturn see more clearly. At the same time, it can make Saturn also see like less clearly. So again, it will depend on many factors how it plays out in your chart. But I do feel like it is in a way a bit of a wake up call, especially when it comes to like our beliefs and how we practice spirituality and show up. Obviously, for the past 2.5 years, we had Saturn and Pisces with Neptune still there as well. Neptune was like for the past 14 years in the sign of Pisces. So I feel like collectively, things were a lot more dreamy. Aries is a lot more tangible. I feel like a lot more people would be like, no, okay, I actually have to do something for my dreams. Like, I actually have to put in conscious effort, dedicate myself to this to make like real tangible shifts that I can like physically see. Because Aries is a lot more physical. And I do not want to undermine Pisces with that because we need like a image where we come from, which is like the Piscean realm. That's why I like this story that it's like still kind of going back and forth because like now we had a lot of time to think about that image, to dream about that image. Okay, but what are we doing about it now? And I also liked what you said about like helping other people. Saturn, once again, ruling over oppositions, rules kind of over the people inside, like the elite, you could say. It also rules the other, like the people outside of the wall, all the weirdos, all the people that don't fit into society. So it almost feels like there's going to be a bigger call again to, I think a lot of this Aryan themes, which we have already witnessed a lot with Venus going retrograde in Aries, of like standing up for yourself, for your rights. There's probably going to be a lot of these type of movements in the air during this times, which I think is good because with this we can probably go like we've already been talking about the collective themes, so let's probably talk more about them unless you want to add something else there.
Um, One just the last thing I would say about Neptune, I think there's two when I think about how to handle Neptune transits. Consciousness plays a big role because with Neptune, it also rules idealism. So yes, you're seeing beyond the material, but it can manifest as either like idealism that's productive or like illusion and escapism. And um, how you access the spiritual realm. Do you do it through escaping reality, trying to use substances or like, I don't know, any kind of like addictive behaviors or tendencies? That all falls within the realm of Neptune, how you escape reality versus are you actually being like consciously using those ideas and those visions that you have and instead of trying to escape reality, like bring, like merge your ideas and your visions with reality. And so that's where consciousness comes in. Like, are you consciously working to bring your ideas to life? And that's Saturn. This is like a good opportunity to now put in work and structure and like actual like concrete steps to like make your visions come to life rather than, if you've been just kind of daydreaming and not really taking action, not really putting in the work, then this transit will feel a little bit more like a reality check of like, oh, like I can't just, like you've been saying, I can't just sit around and daydream about this. I have to actually put in the work. Um, and so, yeah, I think it'll be a really good chance for us, especially because there is so much, like, especially on our internet, there's a lot of, um, like spiritual psychosis, for example. Like that's a very Neptune thing.
Through
And
AI.
Saturn is going to be like, no, like actually, like that's not like you need to be real and honest with yourself of like how your actions and your material reality reflects your spiritual beliefs. So, yeah, I think it's pretty good in depth for Saturn and Neptune. Do we want to briefly, what else do we want to mention before we get into each sign?
Well, I think we can talk a bit more about like like we talked a bit about the collective themes. We haven't said all of the ones we put in the notes. I definitely feel like there's Aries just as a sign is very like about real and raw. Like it wants the real, raw, honest thing. And so it definitely feels like as you said, it's everything is always an opportunity. If you take it as like up to you. But I do feel like with everything being so uh, online, I think there will kind of be an opportunity to do more in real life things again because I feel like a lot of people are kind of getting sick of the online world, you know. I know there's like a surge in technology as well, especially with like Pluto and Aquarius and Uranus and Gemini. So we're not like going away from the technology or anything, but I do think there's like this surge of like let's take responsibility then, though, in the world that is about to get even more technological to do more in real life things, which I can like see with my own eyes, feel with my own skin, body parts, whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
that's like definitely a collective theme that I do think will um pop up more. Yeah, is there something you want to add to this or
No, I think also Aries is like, very independent and likes to do things by herself and has this insistence on like my way or the highway. And
yeah.
Saturn is going to be like, actually, you need to work with other people. You need to let other people help you. You need to, um, like, yeah, you can't, like, we live in a very hyper individualistic world right now. And there's a lot of like, idealizing this idea of like independence and like, oh, I'm the only one who takes care of
Oh
myself.
my God. Sorry.
Um,
There was just kids are playing outside my window and they just kicked a ball at my window.
oh my God, that's also very like also
That Aries.
Aries also rules like war and aggression and fighting and
Yeah,
also
literally.
like literal like armies and like the head of armies. Aries rules the head. So like the head physically, but also the head of things like rulers, emperors, kings, presidents. Um, and so, we might see like Saturn and Aries, like some really like reckless behavior or changes when it comes to like rulers. Like globally, also like in our personal lives with like bosses and just like authority figures in general, new authority figures, like people who might have less experience or are younger. Aries is like young people and like the new and novel suddenly coming to power. That can happen. This is also, um, I guess the first Saturn return for the oldest of Gen Z. So that'll be interesting to see like our that generation like finally becoming adults. Um and Yeah, I think that's everything.
Yeah. Wait, there's a few more things I just want to say,
Oh,
riffing off
sure,
of
sure,
that,
go
because you
ahead.
gave me some new insights right here. Um, Again, first of all, Aries is also a very impulsive sign. I guess what I'm going to talk about now are a bit more of the negative things, but I like we do have to mention them because nothing's ever just nice. Everything's always an opportunity, but there's also going to be like bad ways this is going to play out globally. That's just the way it is. So there's definitely also I feel like Saturn and Neptune in Aries just have a bit of a like kamikaze like energy where it feels like, oh, I'm gonna sacrifice myself for this greater good or something like that. And when we put this into like war, I mean, I don't want to make this a war thing. But just like, people feeling like I want to sacrifice myself for the higher and greater good of like something that is maybe not even like tangible fully to themselves or like feeling responsible that they have to for some reason. That's definitely something that could also be up in the air. Um, then also you mentioning, headaches and everything. Um, Aries is like the spark and the flame. If Saturn restricts, and we think of like what is restricting a flame mean? It means like literally a burnout. And so I do feel like just even because of like the disillusioning aspect of Saturn and Neptune together, I feel like we're already in a pretty big like burnout crisis, you could say worldwide. I do think it's gonna get like it's gonna take an even bigger notch up with all of that. Just because I feel like so many people are sick and tired of how like the system works and how there's like just the benefit, like the long-term benefits kind of don't align. People are just like not really having it, so to say. And I do think it's just gonna reach like a bigger level to the point where maybe which again is a good thing, and it's also Saturn, Neptune, and Aries signification. We're gonna have to actually do something about it globally. Like it's gonna reach such a point where it's like we need to like actively do something about that. Um, because it can be like this spiritual exhaustion, I feel like obviously it can make us more responsible in like what we follow. It can also like rise up like more atheism, so to say, collectively, where people are just like, well, damn, I guess there's no purpose um in any of this. Like, why should I put in any effort at all? Like that's also and then again and then you kind of become completely irresponsible because you're just like, well, why the heck should I take any responsibility for anything if it doesn't matter, so to say. So I do think that's something that can also come up is definitely more like a negative or I don't know, it depends on what somebody's going through. Um, but that will probably be interesting. Saturn in Aries in general can also just feel so, again, like restrictive to yourself, which can then lead you to, instead of taking action, do the opposite, feel completely paralyzed and demoralized and have a lack of confidence like in yourself. Like there's just a lot of like losing power and then like trying to regain back power and losing power and trying to regain back power, like this back and forth ping pong thing there. And then you also mentioned early Gen Z. That is me. So I belong to the Saturn and Aries folks, and I'm like just on the threshold. I'm a 97 person, and there is like kind of a like article, so to say, I started writing, or just like research I started doing, because I did find it interesting. Not like more of the outer planets. So, like Saturn isn't an outer planet. Hey, kitty. Um, so for me, looking at like the early Gen Zs and just like kind of talk briefly about it, just because I do think it like fits into that. Not only are we or other people just like we're getting the Saturn return, which is like a boost of maturity, um, and all of that. It's also like from the outer planet perspective, because Neptune is in there as well. Most of us, actually, I'm not in that group, but most of the people of the early Gen Z have Neptune in Aquarius, which means gonna get a Neptune sextile natal Neptune. Pluto in Aquarius is gonna get a sextile to natal Pluto in Sagittarius, and Uranus in Gemini gonna get a lovely trine to Uranus in Aquarius too. So I feel like there's this interesting opportunity of like, like things are changing. Like early Gen Zs are getting like a step and a grasp into this world, and it's like about taking responsibility. And yeah, I feel like people will be surprised about what happens and like how capable people actually are, like that's what I'm also always saying. I'm like, don't like distrust the younger generations. Like have faith in them. Like they're gonna figure things out. Like it might take a while, especially with Saturn and Aries. I think it definitely takes a while for people. In my life, I've had so many setbacks, so many early setbacks, like taking responsibility way too fast, way too soon. So it's interesting what's gonna happen now with everyone that's getting their Saturn return. I mean, not just early Gen Zs, obviously, older generations getting their second Saturn return or something like that. Um, and if you're wondering for yourself, you're getting the first Saturn return always around the ages of 27 till 30, and then the second Saturn return is from the ages of like 57 to 60. It takes like 30 years, like 29 and a half years technically to be exact, but like 30 years until you get your Saturn return. So if you are in that age range, you are getting your Saturn return.
Or just anyone who has Saturn in Aries.
Yes.
You might be on the older side, if it's
Yes.
like or you might be on the younger side of that. But yeah, anyone with Saturn and Aries, this will be your Saturn return. Um, yeah. And I think just last thing before we get into horoscopes, those with not just Saturn and Aries, but if you have any planet in early Aries, I'd say like the first 10 degrees, you'll probably feel it most this first
Mhm.
year while Saturn's in Aries. And then the later degrees of Aries, you'll start to feel it more in 2027, 2028. Um, and really all cardinal signs. So Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. Will all be feeling because they'll be forming hard aspects, either squares or oppositions to your planets. So if you have any personal planets, especially Sun, Moon, or Rising, in any of those signs, then you might especially feel this energy more. And if you had a lot of mutable signs in your chart, so Pisces, Gemini, Virgo, and Sagittarius, then they'll feel a little bit lighter now, because
Yeah.
Saturn won't be an immutable sign anymore. So a little bit of relief for those folks, but everyone else, those are just like some people to like things to look out for and how it impacts you personally. Um, and yeah, do you want to talk about oh my God, sorry, my cat just jumped off of me. How to use
That's
these
fine.
horoscopes? So I guess we recommend that you read for or listen to your rising sign first and then followed by your sun sign. Um, and again, these are like long-term things. You're not going to feel it overnight. Um, they will kind of take time and build over the next couple years. And yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know what else.
I think that's good. By the way, the reason why we recommend listening to the rising sign is and it's gonna make sense in a minute when you pull up the like segments, is really that we basically put, I mean, like the house systems work that way. And the transits, like when we are talking about horoscopes, we are basing them on the topics of the houses. So if you're listening from a rising sign, it's going to put, like, if you're an Aries rising, it's going to put that in your first house. And so this is going to be the first house topics. But if you have the sun, in a different sign, you're essentially basically putting the sun in your first house. So you're basically saying like, oh, my sun is in the first house. Even though like you might be an Aries rising, but your sun is in Leo or whatever. You're basically being like, oh, I'm gonna put Leo as my first house. So it's gonna give you a whole different set of like topics to watch out for. So that's just what I wanted to put out there. I definitely highly recommend listening to Rising Sign just because the house topics are going to make the most sense. But again, I'm also aware not everybody has the luxury of knowing their birth time, and there's many people that completely vibe with their sun sign horoscopes. So feel free to do that as well.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and
Yes.
share. Um,
That's great. Yeah, we're gonna basically Aid's gonna we're gonna start sharing the screen, and that's gonna give you like an overview of which rising sign we are talking about, and you're gonna basically see much better like where things yeah, in which house the respective uh horoscope falls in, like the house topic that gets activated.
oh, does it pause my screen share when I move to my notes? Okay, I'm gonna
Um,
find a solution for this, but
oh, I see. I mean, I can see everything clearly right now.
right now, does it pause the screen sharing?
I don't know. I can still see
It
it.
says my screen sharing is paused.
Oh.
But what I'm gonna do is pull up the notes on my phone just in case. Um, so we're gonna go in order. We're gonna start with Aries and end with Pisces, the best sign. No, I'm not a Pisces. I just love a Pisces. Um, and yeah, and I guess I can start us off. I'll start with the air and fire signs, and then we'll take turns starting, but we'll both share our thoughts for each sign. So, Aries Sun and Aries Rising. Saturn will be transiting through your first house. And this is the house of yourself, of your physical body. It is the most, it'll have a direct impact on you, your sense of self, your sense of confidence, how you carry yourself, how you present yourself to the world. And Saturn here is going to be um, uh, let's say developing a really honest and serious self-awareness over self-absorption. You know, if you've been hypercritical of how you show up or just like kind of like always thinking about yourself and always thinking about how people perceive you. Saturn and Aries is going to be about no, like this is about how you, like how aware are you over your sense of self. It's going to be about, um, detaching your ego a little bit from your appearance and the way you look. And maybe instead of like thinking so much about how you look, thinking about like what you can do. Like, um, if you struggle with body dysmorphia, this is going to be a period where it's like it's not about how you look, it's about like how you like your actual physical strength and how you carry yourself. Um, and Saturn in the first house can also potentially like limit your like energy or just like overall vitality. You might feel a little bit like you have less energy, a little less motivation. Um, Saturn also health-wise can sometimes bring up like or intensify like underlying or chronic conditions. And so it can kind of feel like you just have less energy and less motivation. But with that, again, because Saturn is about like finding potential and finding possibilities within limitations. It's also a period where it's like if you have limited energy and you have limited, like if your body's putting physical limits on what you can do, then what's important? Like what can be removed from your life and what can you then focus your attention more um just focus your attention on more so that you're not like burning yourself out and not pushing your body to like beyond its limits. Um, and um, it'll also just, Saturn and Aries is taking responsibility for your action. and take more responsibility with your health, with your physical body, and also like how you take charge of your life. Are you acting impulsively? Are you acting recklessly? Are you just kind of chasing anything that feels new and like chasing dopamine rushes and chasing the excitement of everything like Aries loves to do? Or are you thinking, okay, like what can I really take seriously and what excites me and how can I um be more disciplined and like actually work, like dedicate more energy to those things that excite me, um to see like real long, like something build over time beyond just like the initial fascination or excitement of that thing. um yeah, Amia, do you have anything to add for Saturn in the first house?
I do, of course, yeah. So by the way, I feel like maybe if you put your mic again a
Oh,
bit
sorry.
close.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'll do that. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, no, it's great. Just because I feel like I mean we don't have to redo this again. I feel like it rubbed sometimes a bit
Oh,
on the
okay.
shirt, but
Okay.
it's okay. That's restrictions. Um, you know what? Well, you were saying that I was actually thinking of like a real life example, which I think of somebody that was in a nursing school with me, and she like I knew her chart basically, and she still is an Aries rising with Saturn and Aries in that first house, and she is somebody that has a lifelong like peanut allergy, which I think is such a good or also I mean it's just it's very restrictive because you have to really be careful when you go out eating. She said a lot of restaurants sometimes refuse to like serve her because they just don't want to obviously get into any sort of legal things if they're not 100% sure that it's not going to have any sort of like nuts inside. And so her whole life she's living with some sort of restriction around her health and around her body, and that's very Saturn and Aries in the first house, like learning how to live with something that can potentially be life threatening. That's just like her example, but I do think that's like just a good thing to like maybe think about, especially with people that maybe don't have that in their natal like natal as a natal placement, but just like as a transit going. And I'm not saying you're suddenly gonna get a nut allergy or anything like that, but just because this first house does also kind of rule over our body and over our health, it can suddenly be that something comes up. Maybe you haven't been really taking care of yourself. Now it's like, okay, but how? Okay, I have to take responsibility now because otherwise, like my health's gonna. It's like this health scare, Like you go to a doctor and the doctor's like, oh, if you don't take care in the next 2 years, you like your diabetes or something is gonna like develop severely. And you're like, oh shit, like I have to really start doing something. And that's also Saturn and Aries, taking that responsibility and, maybe start having like a more rigorous, like health regime of like going to the gym more or taking walks or just again being maybe more restrictive with your foods and your diets that you're taking in, to then lead to a greater benefit later on. Again, Saturn is always like doing less now to gain more later on. So I think that's what just like came into my mind right now. And again, I think also as you said, if you are an individual that has more like reckless tendencies or something like that, Saturn can definitely chime in and just, yeah, be a bit harsher. Or again, the thing that I said in the beginning that people don't like, it's like you're getting the reactions to your own actions, which are the consequences. Um, but they're, ultimately they're here to mature you and to do something good. But I get it. Like a lot of people don't like them so much, especially if you have a bit more of this impulsive Aryan energy in your chart. Saturn might be a bit of a um killer. Is that the right word I can use for like a joy killer? And like, hey, but like Yeah, I'm just thinking, you know what I'm thinking of? I'm thinking of like Jackass and like these people that did all these crazy stunts. Like eventually, like you could do this for a long time, like maybe even go unscathed. Eventually there's gonna be some sort of consequences, health-wise, mental-wise, whatever, to your like to the things you did. What are you gonna do now about this? So like this is what came to my mind.
Yeah, I think that's good. Um,
Great. Is there something else that came to your mind, or should we move
no,
on
I
to
think I
Taurus?
think we're ready to move on to Taurus.
Great. So let's change the slide.
Oh, there we
You
go.
got to do something.
Taurus and the Saturn in the 12th house.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. Arguably a more probably scary house. At the same time, I do see an opportunity there as well to take like responsibility to like really honestly confront yourself with like the self-sabotaging habits that you're perhaps doing. 12th house is very, what I like to say to people is, the 12th house shows you like, the things that you've been running away from. The 12th house also shows you the things you've been running away from, which means you can face them now. It's definitely uncomfortable as well, especially because Aries likes this honest, raw confrontation with things. And as more like not as more but like as Venus ruled people, usually Taurus is you're not used to that so much. The 12th house is like kind of like a hidden part of yourself, right? So like confronting that can sometimes feel very scary. But it is really gonna like lead you to like take more responsibility, like Saturn, like in a positive way, Saturn going through the 12th house can really be like, I'm just going to take time off, I'm going to retreat, I'm going to take care of myself, I'm going to go to like even to a retreat somewhere else, and like take care of myself properly this time, like take that discipline or whatever. And perhaps also, learning to set better boundaries, realizing like when do I need to rest, when do I need to have alone time, because if it's something you have been struggling with, social burnout can become a thing. Like if it's something you haven't been careful over the years, you might really realize now when Saturn chimes into your 12th house, it's like, oh wow, I'm actually overgiving my energy way too much and I should retrieve more. I know you are a sign that's already a bit more retrieving, but just like in case you have these tendencies, that's definitely something that would be coming up in a more negative or unpleasant way, I guess you could say. Saturn in Aries, again, because it confronts us with these harsher topics, if you aren't ready, it can just come in very abruptly, which can lead to things like having not like going on a retreat, on a spiritual retreat of your own free will, but maybe landing in like an institution, like a psychiatry or something like that. If your mental health is fragile and you don't have the right support, it might be like this is also, taking time off to take care of your mental health is that as well. And then also I guess this is like worst case scenario here, but basically, or not the worst case, but just I did add this here just because Saturn is about the consequences of our actions. Tauruses, you aren't really like the most impulsive sign ever, but depending on which other placements you have, if you have been like, doing things, like now might be the time where it's like, oh, you've taken impulsive actions, or like you've done maybe some illegal stuff, because the 12th house also rules over jails. So it might be something coming up there as well. But again, I want to mention that I don't want to say this to like scare people. Like, the police isn't hiding behind your door if you haven't done anything wrong. But just if you have impulsive tendencies, you might just be confronted with these figures, in a much faster way than you would usually. So I do think that is important to say here as well. So what do you have to say, Aid?
Yeah, I think 12th house, I think of rest and isolation. So, needing to take more rest, more time to yourself, and also, how comfortable are you with isolation, with being by yourself? If you're someone who fears alone time, then Saturn in the 12th house is going to make you take some alone time and really like learn how to be by yourself. Whether that's through like forced isolation or whether that's just kind of feeling a little bit like disconnected with the outside world, feeling like you are just being forced to retreat a little bit more. Um, and Saturn is also like connection with the unconscious and with the spiritual realm. And, um, you know, in terms of the unconscious, like things um, beneath the surface, like feelings you've repressed, whether it's anger or fear or depression or anxiety, things that you just kind of pushed to the side for a long time, now maybe coming up to the surface. Um, and you learning how to like address and face those feelings. And then 12th house is also any habits of self-undoing. I'm sure we hear that a lot when we talk about the 12th house. But if there are any self-destructive habits you've been doing that are usually like coping mechanisms for dealing with those subconscious emotions, Saturn is kind of like taking more responsibility for those, maybe ending or stopping any kind of behaviors that are self-destructive, whether it's addictions or, escaping or like, maybe you're partying every weekend to like escape your depression, and Saturn is going to be like, actually, you can't do that. Um, in
Mhm.
some way or another, it's going to put a limit on that. So, um, uh, yeah, I think that's all I have to say. I think what it'll teach you is to really be comfortable with yourself and to be comfortable with your shadow, and feeling like you're not always running away from something. I think by the end of this transit, you'll feel a lot more at ease with what you're feeling. So, um,
I agree, yeah. What I want to add, I guess, is like you don't have to do this all alone. Like if things are coming up, 12th house transits are not a joke. Like find someone, like a therapist. It doesn't have to be a conventional therapist. I'm thinking like, again, as you said, I love what you said there. Like, there's probably a lot of like repressed anger that can like suddenly come up here in this like Martian ruled 12th house. It's like maybe go to like an anger workshop, like a rage therapy, Like that's great. Like there's we have that here somewhere in like I think it's literally called rage therapy. I haven't gone there, but when I was a child, I swear I wanted to do something like that. It's basically just a room, and you get like a bat or whatever, and you can just like go crazy for like half an hour or something, like let out your anger, So it's like I think it's very much about learning how to constructively let out your anger and not be afraid of it, because 12th house is often things we are afraid of and things we don't like to face. And you having that Martian ruled 12th house, um, like I feel like often anger is something you kind of like, at least Taurus risings, you like kind of shy away from. And like now it's like, no, 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 we're not shying away from that anymore. Like we're not repressing that anymore. But again, like you don't have to do this all alone. It is about isolation, but it's also you can work with a therapist through these maybe harsher topics if they come up.
and also 12th house remedies is volunteering, is
True. Yeah.
community service. So being of service to something without any expecting any material gains in return. If you feel anger or isolation or just like like so disconnected, go volunteer somewhere. Go work with a local nonprofit or like grassroots real like go volunteer at a hospital or a prison or any of these places of isolation, um, you'll find that like you're, I don't know, you will feel a lot less alone, even if like, um, yeah, you'll feel a lot less alone if you're able to like channel that like those feelings into like service. And that also goes back to Neptune in also being in your 12th house now. So um yeah,
100%.
yeah.
I think that's good.
Cool. All right. Next up we have Gemini Sun and Gemini Rising. Ooh, this is a good sign. I wonder why. Not like we have a Gemini in the room. Saturn's going to be in your 11th house. Actually, let me pull up my notes. Like I said, because you're a mutable sign, there'll be a little bit of relief now because Saturn won't be in your 10th house anymore. So any kind of challenges you've been facing with like authority figures might start to soften up a little bit right now, and things related to career. But now with Saturn in your 11th house, it's about I would say, Gemini, you like to be friends with everyone. You like to connect with everyone from all walks of life. And Saturn is about like creating higher standards for the people that you associate yourself with. Um, Maybe you're being more selective with your friends or the groups and like organizations that you work with. Um, and like making sure that the people you associate yourself with are actually like aligned with your personal values and they're not just like people who just came into your life and now you're connected with, but you're friends with people for a reason and you're using your friendships because the 11th house is friends to build something, Saturn, to build something long term. Um, and yeah, maybe just having a more mature approach to networking and building a social network. Um, it could be, Saturn also removes things that are no longer serving you that you've outgrown. So you might have some fallouts with friends or acquaintances that, you're just not like aligned anymore. And so really try to like give space to that. Don't try to crash out. Don't try to start any, it doesn't need to be that dramatic. It's Saturn and Aries, but like you can just let people fall from your life gracefully, with grace and with respect. Um, that doesn't have to be a massive fallout. And then Saturn is also taking responsibility, and because the 11th house also rules um, like organizations and groups of people. It could be you taking on a leadership position in some sort of group, whether it's something that you form, because Aries is something that you do yourself, or like maybe you didn't think you were qualified enough to do something, but because it's Saturn and Aries and it's giving responsibility to like a new voice and someone who's young, maybe suddenly you're pushed to a like position where now you're organizing and facilitating and taking on these leadership responsibilities, and you're like, oh, this is new, and you're kind of like learning on the spot. I think Saturn in Aries is a lot about like learning as you go, which luckily Gemini is very good at. So I think this will be a very productive transit for Gemini. Um, uh, and yeah, 11th house is also like how you present yourself online. So maybe you're being more selective or curating your online appearance a little bit more selectively. Just not sharing every thought you have on the internet, but um, just being a little bit more conservative, a little bit more like clear with how like the image that you're presenting yourself with and the groups that you want to associate yourself with online. Um, and then 11th house, lastly, the last thing I think I'll say is it's also your social values and like your um, like um what do you want your friendships to look like? What does community look like for you? And how does that align with like your kind of like vision for the future? Like, what kind of world do you want to build? And so, um, if you crave community, sometimes you have to be the one to create it. Like, if you don't feel like you, and this is something I've really been, um, firsthand experiencing is like if you feel disconnected from people from the outside world, or you don't feel like there's a group or friend circle that you feel aligned with, sometimes you have to be the one to create that. Um, so that's the Aries part too. It's like you taking charge and you being the initiator. Um, yeah. I mean, do you have anything to add to that for
That's
Geminis?
great. Yeah. There's no, that's great what you said. Well, to riff off is just like because the 11th house is also about like our dreams and visions and like what we want to create. And if you can get super clear on that, which is like Saturn, like getting very concrete on what you want to do and create, then you can start to align yourself with those people. And again, with like Neptune coming there in as well, already is there technically. There might have been like a bit of a like disillusionment of like, oh, are these really the people that I want to hang out with? Because again, as you said, like sometimes Gemini, um, they have a lot of friends, but they're like it can be like a bit more superficial, in that sense where then like, are these really the people that you can like build things with, or is it just like to fill that, that social interactions that you kind of need, which is fine, but Saturn might really like chime in and be like, "Hey, what if we do like restrict our social interactions a bit and line it up more with the people that are like wanting to pursue the same goals with?" And one real thing that can happen with Saturn, is especially when we distance ourselves from people, is again, we can feel pretty lonely and isolated. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Like it can be a good thing. It can, like, if you kind of isolate yourself a bit more from people, you can get to know yourself a lot better. And once you know yourself a lot better, you can align with things a lot better, even if it's a harsh period. It might be, like it might in the beginning be a harsh period that involves separation, like seeing like, oh, the people I'm hanging out with are actually not aligned. And that can be tough. Like rerouting your friend groups and the people you want to surround yourself with is not the easiest process. It involves sacrifices and alone time. But I promise you, like if you do that, like if you choose to do that, you will find so much, so, like a lot better people in the long run. But it does, again, it's like that's Saturnian sacrifice that is kind of involved here. Um, so that's, I guess, what I want to add here. And I think it goes similar into something you said about the 12th house. And like charity, this isn't specifically 11th house charity, but just like you can kind of do the same example here with if you are feeling lonely, like go to organizations and you like might be surprised how well you do by instead of like shift like from having the focus of like, oh, like I'm so alone and I don't have anybody to like, okay, how can I help other people that might be in the same boat? Like volunteering at like, I don't know, a homeless shelter or just somebody somewhere where people are also struggling with that thing and like taking the responsibility to creating the connection. Like, don't wait till things come to you. Start creating it. Be the innovative one. Take the lead. So this is what I would also add here as well.
Great. I think that was really good.
Great, great.
Right.
So, Cancer Sun, Cancer Rising. We are heading into the territory of the 10th house, which is an angular house. So it's going to form a square to your rising sign, which can be a bit tough or rough at times. Again, it depends on like where your rising is when exactly, like at which degrees your rising is when exactly Saturn is going to square that. So with this, there can be a bit of a like push and pull dynamic between like how much responsibility am I putting into my work and my career and what I want to achieve and be in the world versus like, am I neglecting myself because of that? Like, am I putting too much out there? Like, if there's such an emphasis on the 10th house, like, there's also a big chance of like forgetting yourself as the individual. Um, like that can happen. At the same time, it might also be an invitation to actually take more responsibility and initiative at your workplace. Um, like, you know, Cancer rising, sometimes you're a bit gentle, sometimes you're a bit soft. We need that. At the same time, Saturn and Neptune, your 10th house, are like, hey, but if you have that dream, if you want to achieve like that certain like status or whatever, like you're gonna have to do things. You're gonna have to kind of get out of the comfort zone of your shell, of your protective shell. And I don't know, ask for that raise, ask for that promotions, ask the people around you to do things because things aren't like people can't just read your mind. You're gonna have to take that initiative and like assert yourself more, so to say. At least if that's something what you want, right? There's no forcing here. Um, and I think there's also like your own trust into your like inner authority and your leadership of abilities might develop much more. Like you might get pulled to act like let me actually say it this way. If you don't respect your own authority and skills, the chance that other people will do it is also not the highest. It's like you have to have that respect first of like, yeah, I can do these things. I can pull off these things. Like I am that person. And then it's going to be easier for other people to recognize you as well, like recognize your efforts, right? Like that's very 10th housey. And uh again, there might be this like dichotomy a bit between your like public role and your personal, which is that square from the 10th and the first house. What could also happen is, you know, the 10th house sometimes can be the like authority people around you. So it might actually happen that at work or something, you like there's a switch of up of your boss or whatever, like there's a new authority figure, and this figure is very restrictive, limits you. Maybe you get laid off or whatever, like you need to completely reroute here. So that's definitely something that can also happen. Or there's like setbacks and delays. Obviously, that's very Saturnian in like getting the like you basically realizing, oh, I need to put in a lot more time and discipline to like achieve a certain thing that I want to achieve or the way that I want to be viewed. Um, Also, since the 10th house is about how you're being viewed publicly, Saturn can go both ways. There's people that might have more trust and faith in you as an authority figure. At the same time, maybe people are also viewing you as the like restrictive and limiting force um in their lives or how like you are perceived. Yeah, that's what I have to say here. What do you have to add?
Yeah, that's great. I think um, Saturn also crystallizes wherever it goes. So, becoming very specific and clear, like this is what I do, this is how I want to show up publicly. Like I am an artist, I am a musician, I am, being very clear and upfront with like how you show up publicly. Um, Also, yeah, definitely like testing your leadership uh capabilities. Um, and with that, also your ability to delegate tasks. I think Cancer loves to sometimes can have like a savior mode, like, oh, I can do that. I can take care of this. I can take care of you. And with Saturn in your 10th house, it'll be um kind of asking you to like take control and like delegate tasks to more people and not do everything by yourself. Um I think also Saturn to the 10th house, you might experience some pushback from authority figures, from parents, from bosses, from leaders and institutions, um, and uh, criticizing like what you do for work, what you do career-wise. And I think it's a test to kind of be like, okay, this is what I want, and to really like be comfortable in like what you're like pursuing, like the professional goals that you have. Um, and yeah, so pushback from authority. I'll also say like Saturn and Aries, it takes time to make sense. Like, um, with Aries at first, sometimes it's like that didn't make any sense. Like that it Saturn and Aries, like it needs time to age. So if you're doing anything and at first everyone is like, what are you doing? That's crazy. Like the way your leadership style is like not traditional, or it's just not what is expected. Um, Trusting that like with time it will age better. And whenever in history someone did something differently, at first always it was always met with pushback. Um, and so kind of trusting and like staying committed to no, like I'm doing this because it's aligned with my values and the kind of leader that I want to be. Um, that'll give you the motivation and the faith to keep at it. Um, and by the end of this Saturn transit, Saturn in your 10th house, you'll feel very, very clear on like, I'm glad that I held my ground in this way, even when I was faced with all this backlash, because there's definitely, like we were saying, like Cancer leads with intuition and leads with softness, and that is definitely something that's needed right now, um, collectively. So, um, yeah, Mia, do you have anything else for Saturn in the 10th house?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Um,
Yeah,
can move on
great.
to Leo.
All right, another amazing sign, Leo rising, Leo sun.
I wonder why.
Wonder why. Leo will Saturn will be transiting your ninth house. So it'll making a positive aspect to you. It'll be making a trine. The ninth house is all about your worldviews. Actually, Amia and I did a podcast episode on the ninth house. So check it out if you
Yes,
like how we bounce off ideas. That was a great episode.
100%.
If I do say so myself. But yeah, ninth house is about your worldview. It's about what's your perspective on life? Like, how do you create meaning? You do it like what are your beliefs? What are your spiritual, moral, philosophical, political beliefs? Who do you believe in? What do you believe in? What's the meaning? What's the point of all of this? It's like seeing the bigger picture, your ability to zoom out and see the bigger picture. And with Saturn in the ninth house, it can maybe inhibit or test your ability to zoom out and see the bigger picture. There might be a temporary or weakened like loss of faith and feeling like, oh, like what's the point of all of this? Like how does everything like fit together? Um, and so this 2.5 year transit is about like really becoming clear on like and firm and confident in what you believe in. Like, no, I'm doing this because I believe in this XYZ, or it's aligning your actions with your moral values. Um, it could also be, putting in more work or responsibility in some like pursuing a spiritual or like an educational path. Ninth house also rules higher education. So maybe you're deciding, oh, like I want to get um, this degree or this certification in something. Maybe I want to go back to school and study this, or maybe I want to. Ninth house is also foreign countries, so maybe I want to travel more and experience other cultures, or if not physically traveling, then at least like getting to know more cultures of like where you live. Or doing that through like research. Ninth house is also research. Um, Reading more books, going to more lectures, really expanding your intellectual horizons. And Saturn there can be like you're putting more effort in on those things. Um, uh, what else? there could be some challenges when it comes to foreign relations. So, if you're living in a foreign country or traveling in a foreign country, there might be some challenges with like, how long you're able to stay or, um, like your like ability to be mobile there. So just something to keep in mind if you're like traveling a lot the next couple of years, definitely be just prepared for anything that could go wrong, especially dealing with like legal things because ninth house is the law. Um, so like visas, passports, like make sure you're very like on top of those things if you're traveling. Um, as on top of it as you can be. Um, and uh yeah, I think that's all I have to say for now. Mia, do you have anything comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean that's plenty.
That was a lot.
But yeah, no, all good things, absolutely. I was thinking of first of all, again, Neptune is also there, right? So there's definitely the ninth house is just like it's not a fragile place in essence. It can be a fragile place if we get very disillusioned about like what we believe in because our beliefs shape our world and how we view the world. And if like Saturn and Neptune kind of chime in and you're like, damn, I don't even know what to believe in anymore, this can be a very like sensitive space or thing to go through because it almost, I mean, it kind of forces you to like completely rewrite your like um worldview, which is a big structure that we usually have. So like a structure kind of get like falls apart, and now you're like, okay, what do I do with this? Um, Mars, which is the ruler of your ninth house, also with Leo rising, which rules the fourth house. So I would not be surprised if there's like maybe some sort of like the beliefs or the structures that you grew up with are getting kind of like rewrote, or you're really like questioning like how did my upbringing shape me, make me into the person that I am, and like the beliefs I have right now. And like yeah, again, maybe taking a distance, maybe taking things more into your own hands of like, okay, now I'm gonna shape my own worldview. Like now I'm taking responsibility over how I'm living my life. And yeah, again, there could be like a real like spiritual burnout, like the of like what type of faith or belief do I want to have or not have? And again, there's when these things happen, there's usually a quest for and a quest in general, I feel like is very ninth housey, like a quest to something. I'm going on an adventure. Um, and so that's why I feel like there's like travel there. There's also like pilgrimages there. And I wrote this in the notes because I'm like, that's if something like that happens, it might be a very good time to, again, maybe take a pilgrimage or take some time off to travel to like find yourself. Um, again, maybe you are again, if it's something from your upbringing, maybe you are going back to like the heritage you came from. You're like, I want to go back to like my lineage and see like how people live there or whatever, something like that. I want to get in touch with the old faith and belief systems. I need to like find that out for myself. Or again, just like taking a solo trip, you know? Aries is about doing things on our own. Um, so, I mean, Leah, you're definitely not like shy to that, but if you're somebody that does things often with other people, it's like, well, just go on that solo trip. Like, don't wait to have the right people around you. Like, just go take that trip by yourself. Do it yourself first. Take that initiative. And again, as you said before, if there's like there could be some issues faced with like moving abroad or again like education oftentimes when or work-wise, right? We get placed to work or study in a different country, in a foreign country, and there just can be these like restrictions or hardships that are unusually hard, like again like a visa issue or something, and you're like, oh gosh, like now this is being delayed, I can't immediately move abroad. Or there is like you have certain imaginations and expectations and you move to the place and it isn't exactly the way you expected it to be. Like it's maybe a lot harsher or whatever. That can definitely also happen, like kind of getting disillusion of like, oh wait, this country that I wanted to move in for years, now I'm here and it's actually not as great as I thought it would be. So keep that in mind if you are thinking of uh like moving or traveling abroad, or studying abroad, all of that. But definitely also a great opportunity to, really commit to your like studies if you are studying abroad, especially, or something like that.
Yeah, I see like a lot of Leos maybe like I like the term quest. It doesn't have to be a physical one, but it can be like an intellectual one. Maybe you're doing a deep dive into a topic that's always interested you. Maybe you're writing a book. Ninth house is also publishing, so taking on a big publishing project, long form content, um, lecturing, writing long form is ninth house. Um, and yeah, and just putting more meeting discipline, Saturn, with whatever spiritual practice you have or spiritual or philosophical beliefs, ninth house. Um, uh, and like maybe like definitely making those concrete. Um, yeah, for anyone who works in like that kind of industry or even in teaching, because ninth house is also teaching, maybe you become a teacher of some sort, or maybe you meet a teacher or a guide or someone who has more knowledge than you or more um, wisdom in some way. Ninth house is also like gurus. So like you could become that for someone else. Or you might meet someone who, like a teacher who teaches you a lot of like hard lessons, maybe,
Mm.
but is really like fueling your spiritual and intellectual growth for the long term. Um, yeah, I think
Yeah,
that is,
that's great.
thank you. Think we're ready for Virgo?
Virgo, yes.
Virgo.
I don't know why I turn British sometimes. But I like the pronunciation of Virgo better than
Virgo.
Virgo.
Virgo. I've been watching a lot of Walter Mercado lately, and so everything is in Spanish. Virgo.
In German, it's Jungfrau, completely different. Um,
Jungfrau.
yeah, literally,
Wow.
literally virgin, which is Virgo, right? But it's anyhow.
Wow.
Um, and in Croatian, it's Djevica, which is the same thing. So now we got all the languages in. Uh,
We covered the ninth house, and now all of a sudden we're
exactly.
speaking all the languages we have.
I swear my cat is also meowing here. I don't know if y'all can hear her. It's her room, so apologies if she's wait, say hi.
Oh, hello.
So yeah, with Virgo, we are entering the eighth house territory, which again is maybe a more gosh, I swear she's being distractive here. Um, I don't know if she needs food or something. Um, Let me restart that again. So, with Virgos, we are entering your eighth house territory, which is also, again, it's a more difficult place in that sense because the eighth house is a house that is in aversion to the ascendant, meaning you can't see it directly, meaning it is informing a major aspect. So, it is a bit of a blind spot. Um, the eighth house is also, at least in ancient astrology, we call it the idle place, which means there is some sort of link to idleness. For me, that part, like how the eighth house feels, or when transits come, how they feel, it often feels like a place of limbo. Like it's very hard to like get out of that rut or something. Um, and so this is kind of what might get activated there, especially with these like Aryan Martian themes. I feel like, you Virgos are definitely also usually people that like to work behind the scenes, not so much in front of the scenes or being the main character. The eighth house is highlighting that part of yourself, though, which usually there is some sort of like hidden place where you're like, I actually want to be more assertive. Like I actually want to be more I don't mean that in a sexual, I just mean like dominant in like areas of your life and like taking responsibility, which you're taking more than enough responsibility. But just like how you are, because the eighth house has a lot to do with like our entanglements with other people's and like how we are managing our energy with other people. That's why the eighth house also rules over a lot of our anxieties because it is outside of our control. It's everything that we don't really have so much control over, which is like kind of the relationships and the give and take aspects of the relationships that we have with other people, which oftentimes involve some sort of debts, which the eighth house, that's why rules over debts, which can be money wise. The eighth house rules over other people's money, but can also be debts of like emotional depths, physical depths, spiritual sort of depths. Oftentimes, when we meet like eighth house synastry or we meet people through eighth house transits, like they are our eighth house transits, it's often people we have what we call like karmic entanglements with, like soul ties or whatever. And so there is a big chance you might be meeting someone like that, or if you are already in an existing relationships, things may really take a toll on like getting more serious about we need to like really figure out how we are exchanging our energies in this relationship. Like, is the give and take appropriate? Is somebody giving too much? Is somebody giving too little? So these are all things that can happen here. The eighth house is honestly, it's a very interesting house. There's like a lot of things are going on there for the fact that it's the idle place. So it's kind of funny. There's like a lot of things going on there. But just the feeling that we often can get is that like limbo feeling of them moving so slowly, right? Because if you have karmic entanglements with somebody, and the eighth house also rules over what is that name? Like courts. If you have like some sort of entanglements and like it involves like court things, these things can move so slow, especially because you always have to wait on the other person. Like if it involves another person, you oftentimes have to wait. What will they respond? Will they take the time? So like these settlements can take such a huge toll on us, and this is very eighth house. So everything that involves any sort of like settlements, loans, like taking money, taxes, triple, double check everything just because you might get into this weird territory of, and I'm also saying this because Neptune is there, of like maybe not seeing something clearly for what it is, like, not reading the fine print. And so I do just like, I think it's very important to mention that here. Like, if there's anything that involves these things, definitely double, triple, thruple, whatever, check all of these like contract things. Um, what else is there? There's so much to be said about the eighth house. Um, um, the eighth house is, in a way, it's similar to the 12th house. It's not necessarily that it holds our like self-sabotaging behaviors, but a lot of these behaviors, like how we bring in the past into the present moment, like our traumas, things that are kind of stuck, which again is like the limbo feeling of idleness, like things that are very hard to process, grief, shame, anger, all of that. Definitely, Virgos, if you struggle with anger or repressing anger, rage therapy might also be like the time for you during this transit to look into. And if it's about facing some sort of traumas or wounds or things that happened, it's probably because of like some power struggles and imbalances that took place. And I would not be surprised if it's again something that just like has to do with your upbringing, where yourself, like the Aries rules over like ourselves, and like where was your power stripped or taken away from you? Or like where were you forced to be overly responsible when um, like you were not ready to do that. So there's definitely that might be coming up as well. And so that's why here again, I highly encourage you to work with a therapist or just somebody where like you don't have to go through these harsher topics if they're coming up alone. So this is what I have to say right now. I feel like there's so much to be said, but I'm gonna let you say some things as well here.
I think that was good. Yeah. Eighth house is I can say personally, like I just had Saturn go through my eighth house. And it's definitely eighth house is anything that comes up when you get close to other people, because eighth house is also intimacy. So whether that's like material things, like shared resources like financial resources and entanglements. Um, it also is like any kind of like intense feelings of like attachment to other people, your attachment wounds, and attachment styles. And so really coming to address those and um what happens, when you get close to people, to other people, there's always the risk of getting hurt, and there's always the risk of facing your shadow and facing the ways in which, like you said, like power was taken away from you, and therefore you look for that in relationships. um and so there can be some challenges of like getting emotionally and physically entangled with other people, and um again, Saturn is in its fall in Aries, so it's like dealing with rejection, dealing with, you know, whatever hurt or pain comes up when you get close to people, because that's the risk that there is when with intimacy is getting close to other people require, and feeling loved by people and connected to them, is being willing to be hurt by that and still yet pursue those connections. So um yeah, I feel like it'll Saturn through the eighth house really changes your view on intimacy. It definitely makes you braver, and you do have to be willing to like um in a way surrender. Eighth house is also about surrendering, and letting yourself get close to people, regardless of the what you could potentially lose. Yeah, I think anything else for eighth house Saturn?
Yeah, I feel like I don't know, I mean personally I'm just so fascinated by the eighth house. So
Yeah.
there's I guess what I also could add here is that again, because Saturn restricts, it could be a period where you really struggle with feeling supported by other people. Again, could be in a financial, emotional, spiritual way where you really feel like you're at the short end of the stick of like yeah, how people are like not really supporting you. And this might be really harsh. And at the same time, there is um the invitation here to, if it is because you are not speaking your wants and needs, like speak up, like Saturn in Aries is about like taking the responsibility to like say what you want and need from other people, which is eighth house. So people can actually give it to you. Otherwise, people are just kind of like in the dark if you don't even fully know what you want and need. So there is like this invitation of like, kind of doing that, being a bit more bold. Exactly. And what I also have sometimes seen with just generally Saturn eighth house transits is people actually choosing to go sober or celibate or something like that. Like limiting, I mean, substances don't necessarily have to do with other people per se, but there is also often addiction, like in form of like, or it could also be like, stopping some sort of emotional addiction with other people, like a love addiction or something like that. But just basically, yeah, because sobriety can mean many things. It is kind of like stepping away from some potential like self-harming behavior that stems from involvement with other people, and just like getting very clear on that. And that can also be like choosing to perhaps go celibate, to like be like, okay, I need to sort things out on my own first before I can fully engage in a relationship again, because as you said, intimacy requires a lot of us. and we need to feel safe and ready for that. And maybe there's first some things that we need to face before we can continue with that. Yeah. So, Virgo risings, you probably got the longest horoscope.
That's all right. I think we're ready to move on though. All right. Uh, Libra Sun and Libra Rising. We're halfway there.
Yay.
Um, Saturn's in your seventh house. This is big. Seventh house is relationships, all kinds of one-on-one relationships, partnerships, collaborations, romantic relationships, contracts, agreements with other people. And Saturn here is, oh, I lost my notes. Let me bring them back. Um, Saturn here is about, this can manifest in a few different ways. It can be about committing or taking on more responsibility in a relationship, taking these relationships much more seriously. So it could be, uh, I really like this relationship or this partnership that I have with this collaborator, and I'm really willing to fully commit to it for long term. A lot of people get married during Saturn and the seventh house transits, I will say. A lot of people also go through divorces and relationship endings with Saturn in the seventh house. I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but there can also be separation and ending of relationships that are no longer aligned, that can't withstand the test of time. Um, so it's about developing like more serious connections and potentially like ending some relationships or some partnerships that just they're just not a priority. They're not really like fueling your life. They're not really building anything. There's not a lot of substance to them. Saturn likes things that have substance and that can grow over time. So um that's pretty big. Also potentially like creating boundaries and standards for relationships. Like if you're the type of person who just like lets anyone walk into your life, um, especially Libras can be very like accommodating of other people and like very like adapting to other people's needs and wanting to like create balance. Um, Saturn and Aries is like, no, like you also have to be willing to put your foot down and like assert your needs and set boundaries in relationships. And that might feel like you're being a little selfish at first for Libra energy. But with Saturn there, it's like if you want your relationships to last and to be solid and long lasting, then you have to be willing to um like assert those needs and set boundaries. Um and let's see. Yeah, I think this is just a 2-year period where like you can really become clear on like what you want relationships to look like. That's pretty broad, but also what you look for in other people is often something that you are looking for in yourself, or what you admire in other people is something that you struggle to connect with within yourself. So also like seeing relationships as a mirror, um, and like if one doesn't work out, then perhaps what it's inviting you to do is to connect to that energy and that like thing that that person represented, like finding that in yourself. If you're ever met with like, loss or rejection over the next couple of years, or like you go through a breakup, then there'll be a lot of that will be kind of the tone of it, of like like finding that what you look for other people and yourself. Um, yeah, that's pretty straightforward. I don't know. Do you
It
have anything
is.
else, Mia, for seventh house?
Yeah, it is the seventh house is honestly all the angular houses are pretty straightforward. Um, I feel like, yeah, Saturn seventh house, especially in Aries, can definitely be a lot of like rejection therapy, which might seem harsh at first, but as you said, can really lead you to integrate these yeah, these parts that you crave in others, like realizing that's actually something I have within me, or like oftentimes like the potential we see in others is really like our own potential that we are not tapping into, serving as an invitation to actually do so. And sometimes the seventh house can also symbolize our partners. So it might not be that we are feeling, or like that Libras are feeling that Saturn so much, but it's actually their partner that is feeling or embodying that Saturnian quality much more, which obviously then has an effect on the person, right? Because like if it's people that we are in partnership with, they obviously always affect us as well. But there might be some like Saturnian topics that come up in your partner's lives. So, like them struggling with setbacks or restrictions or limitations, and because that happens in their life, now you're faced with, okay, how do I deal with that happening in their life? So, definitely, I think something worth mentioning. Again, one-on-one relationships are broad. It does not have to be romantic relationships. It can also be close friendships, like a very close friend, just people that know you on a more intimate level. And when I say intimate, I don't mean necessarily a physically intimate level. It can just also be like an emotionally intimate level. So it can also be therapists, people that just know more about you than the average Joe. And so there might also be like changes or things you realize, like if you have been going to therapy, maybe things aren't really working out with, or you're realizing I'm having way more setbacks in like how I wanted to like plan out my life, and like I'm kind of getting impatient. I think it's definitely a lot about like the mirroring quality of these Martian Aryan topics in that seventh house. Or again, perhaps also just like finding a new therapist, finding somebody else that can support you a lot better and can be like a guiding hand, can be that Saturnian figure in your own life. So it's easier for you to face these topics, like these harsher Saturnian topics that might be coming up. That's what I have to add here.
Yeah, for sure. Like, definitely like keep your standards high with Saturn in the seventh house. Don't settle. If you do settle, those relationships will get kicked out somehow, some way, shape, or form. Um, yeah, that's
Yeah, that's
that's
good.
everything. Awesome.
Scorpio, Sun and Rising. That's also a very good rising sign, just saying.
And sun sign.
And sun sign, yeah. Um, in any case, so Scorpio suns and risings, this transit Saturn and Aries is falling in your sixth house. Um, Again, a more difficult house because it is an aversion to the ascendant. Although for Scorpio risings, there's the aversion for the sixth is interesting since it is also a Mars ruled house. And this is like the ruler of your ascendant. So there is like a way in which the sixth house is more tangible simply because like it has the same ruler as your rising sign, or like there's like this interesting connection there despite this house being in aversion to your first house. And the sixth house, I personally like to call it the Sisyphos house just because this house has everything to do with the things we kind of just have to do. Like if there's a house that is about washing the daily dishes, mentally, spiritually, or whatever, that's the sixth house. Like things you just kind of have to do to keep things going. Sometimes we don't know why. Sometimes we don't know why. The sixth house is often about things we just have to do and we don't really know why, but we have to do it to like keep things running. Like again, because if you don't, the dishes are gonna just pile up and you don't want that. That's why it has a lot to do with our like daily routines and structures, often in relation to our health. The sixth house is like it holds this coin, which is the same from each side, but it's like health and illness, right? Both of them are visible in the sixth house. And now Saturn coming to knock at your sixth house, especially because it's also, sorry, Saturn coming to knock at your sixth house. Because it is Mars, it affects your first house, which is your body. So if you haven't been taking care of your health, if you have been, maybe doing some self-destructive behaviors, being a bit reckless, Saturn is like, we're not doing this anymore. Like, you need to take some serious health of your body. Again, might be the same thing with which sign was it? I don't know. I think Taurus risings or something, or Aries risings, right? Where it's like you get a health scare or something pops up, and you're just like, ooh, yeah, if I don't take care of this, this can develop into something very serious. Um, Saturn the sixth is chronic things, chronic issues. If you have been dealing with any sort of chronic diseases or illnesses, Saturn might like amplify that. And just like make you very aware to maybe be more rigid about the things. Like, how are you spending your days? What are you doing? What are you actually like doing for your health? Um, and yeah, a lot of things we sometimes have to do for our health is restricting things. Like maybe you have to restrict your diet. Maybe you have to, you know, stop, I don't know, playing video games or watching shows and like go start going to the gym. So it has a lot to do with like letting go of certain things and focusing, like just taking more responsibility. Because if you don't, Saturn will, like Saturn will just come in and chime in and be like, okay, well, if you're not taking responsibility, then let's see about that hospital visit because the sixth house is also about hospital visits. It's about like journeys, unpleasant journeys, which often involve like hospital visits or visits to your therapist or practitioner or something like that. I think there's also a big opportunity here to learn to manage your stress levels in a better way because yeah, like the Aries sixth house can sometimes be very scattered. Like the way that you're doing like your daily chores and routines sometimes can be a bit more scattered. So Saturn is inviting a bit more like discipline and like management here. So there is an opportunity to actually learn to manage your stress levels better. Can also be if you're self-employed, like really, taking responsibility over like how you structure your day. Because if you are your own boss, like everything depends on you. So like, what are you doing with that? Is this working out or is it not working out? Like, are your stress levels too high or not? And again, could also be a good time to like work with a coach or somebody that can help you establish that in a better way. With Neptune there as well, again, it might also be like, Scorpio rising is just getting an urge to do more selfless service to other people. Um, it's a very like nurse transit house, which is why I'm not surprised that I chose the nursing profession for a long while with having Saturn in the sixth house myself, in Aries. There's like, the urge to like help people in a difficult situation. And I mean, I specifically chose to work as a psychiatry nurse. So there's like this urge to like help people that have some sort of like disability or that are not, you know, uh, usually kind of maybe more frowned upon by society, like the outcast or something like. Um, I know that was big for me. I was like, I want to see, like, I want to help the people that other people like kind of look away from. Like, that was very important for me when I chose that work years ago. So there might be like an urge to do something like that, to like go do more like charity work or just like service, volunteer at a shelter. It doesn't even have to be paid, but just something that like really fulfills you, like that fulfills you in a new level and gives you yeah, because like this can definitely impact your health in a good way as well. And then I'm sorry, like there's so much to be said about the sixth house as well. Um, Again, as always, all these houses that have to do with other things. Sixth house, since it also has to do with like jobs, employers, can also mean that your working field, if you're working at a job, they are like very Saturnian. You might feel restricted with your job or the people you work around with. They might be pushing a lot of responsibility on you that you might not really want to be taking. So these are things that might also be like popping off or showing up. So that's what I have to say here. Oh yeah, also great because the sixth house rules pets. maybe getting a pet.
Yeah. Or taking like having to take more responsibility with pets or
Yeah.
the small animals. Yeah, that was great. I think you covered pretty much everything. I One thing I'll add is the sixth house. When I think of sixth house, I think of stress management. Um, I was listening to this health podcast about stress management and how stress isn't inherently bad. You need adrenaline, you need cortisol to survive. When it becomes bad or not helpful is when the level of stress in your body doesn't match the level of stress in your environment. And when we think of the sixth house as the last house um, before we get to the seventh house, the last invisible house, like beneath the horizon, it's the final stages of preparing your body, your physical body, preparing it to meet the demands of the external world. And so the sixth house is about like what do you need to do to align your body with your day-to-day environment? Like what vitamins do you have to take? Um, you know, like are you getting enough exercise? Does your work environment actually support the work that you need to get done? Um, uh, Pets, are they like, are they adding more stress or are they relieving stress? All these things fall under that, like the quality of your day-to-day life and your habits and routines. And just straightening out and, um, becoming more disciplined and like serious about like how you take care of yourself. Um, yeah, I think that
Yeah. That's good. I
that's
guess my advice, or I don't know, I guess just a natal Saturn and Aries in the sixth house, which is also getting a Saturn return. I don't know what exactly is awaiting for me, but just as how this has oftentimes played out in my birth chart is first of all, I got burnout at a very young age. Again, taking up a job that was way more responsible for what I could handle at that time, for how young I was, essentially. Like now I would work as a psychiatry nurse in a completely different way. But a lot of setbacks, especially when it comes to like work, doing jobs, all of that. And one thing I also realized, and I like that you put this stress management in here as well, is like um, I know, and I'm totally for it. Like, there's a big urge to like rest more, and I don't think that's wrong. At the same time, just resting can be equally bad, especially if you have a Martian ruled sixth house. There's an urge to be active and do things, and I have definitely personally fallen into the trap of resting too much and feeling uneasy, getting like super anxious because I'm like not doing like if you don't take Mars seriously, like if you don't tame Mars, Mars can wreak havoc, essentially. Um, and so we really need to like fuel this Martian energy so it can exert itself in a way that's beneficial for us as an individual, especially with like a Mars ruled first house as well. So it's impacting us personally. So like there's a big responsibility here in like how much are we resting and how much are we doing things? And like don't ignore that like you're probably really propelling if you're exerting your energy into projects that are actually fulfilling and good for you in all sorts of ways, like don't ignore that. Otherwise, Mars can easily wreak havoc and impact your health in a bad way. That's what I have to say here. So yeah, we can go to
great.
Sag. Yay.
All right, Sag Sun and Sag Rising. Saturn is going to be in your fifth house. And the fifth house is the feel-good house. Anything that makes you feel good, how you pursue pleasure, how you find joy. Um, Saturn here is making you um, be more responsible and selective with the things that you do for fun, how you use your free time, um, and how you let yourself play. I think a really great point made in Amia's fifth house episode was that the fifth house, the quality of your fifth house and the quality of your ability to feel happy and joy is your ability to stay present. And if you're not present, then it's hard to enjoy things. Um, and so Saturn here, um, there might be some like facing realities or uh let's say just like putting more energy or focus on like what you do for fun. So whether it be taking a hobby more seriously or fifth house is like art and creative practices, creativity. So maybe you're committing to more serious like art practice, or you're starting to take a hobby more seriously. Fifth house is also sports, so things like any type of like leisure activities, like maybe a hobby that you've had for a long time, you're now like starting to take it more seriously. um there might be, um, let's see. Sometimes there can be like a creativity block with Saturn in the fifth house, just not feeling very like, oh, like it's so hard to like enjoy this, or like to feel inspired and to feel like connected to what you're creating. Um, and so it can kind of like limit your creativity. Um, fifth house is also romance and dating, not necessarily like long-term relationships, but definitely like your love life, and how you like, yeah, like find romance in other people and in the day-to-day. And I think we live in a day and age when we look for fun, and like we look to dating for fun as like a hobby, and romance, like pursuing romance is like a hobby. And in doing that, we neglect a lot of our other creative hobbies and creative outlets. And so I think Saturn in the fifth house for a lot of Sag placements is going to feel like, are you putting too much energy into dating and into looking for love outside of yourself, when really that feeling of joy and pleasure and romance can be cultivated in your own life, on your own, in your hobbies, in your art, in your sports? Um, it doesn't have to be found through like other people. Um, Let me think what else I have to offer. Sag rising. Yeah, where are you overindulging? Because fifth house is how you indulge. And Sagittarius can tend to sometimes overdo it when they get excited about something. They're like, they run with it. I think Sagittarius doesn't run, it leaps. So it's like jumping into things. And fifth house is also like a risk taking, and like gambling. And so like Saturn's gonna be like, no, like you can't, you're gonna keep losing money if you're like indulging in things that aren't sustaining you long term. Um, fifth house, last thing I'll say is also children. So if you have kids, or if there are like children in your life, you might have to take on more responsibility with them. Um, you might, if you have kids, you might feel a little bit more distant with them, or have to set some boundaries, or like yeah, some boundaries like with how much time you can spend with them, because you also have to make space for your own like pleasure and hobbies. And so finding a balance between like feeling your own inner child and feeling other children, and letting yourself be a child. Um, and yeah, I think definitely because Sagittarius and Aries are both fire signs. Saturn and Aries for a lot of Sagittarius is going to be like, where are you being a little bit too reckless, and where are you being a little bit too impulsive? Especially with like leisure activities, going out, going to party, spending like too much money at the club, or whatever you're doing for fun on the weekends. Saturn is like, no, like you actually, there are things that you can do that bring you joy, but that like are a little bit more slow and require a little bit more work. Um, yeah. Amia, do you have anything to add? Fifth house.
Yeah, there's so many good things added here. There's uh I was just thinking, because Saturn brings in consequences, and again, obviously not every Sag rising is like that, but just it depends on where the natal Jupiter is, of course. But there is definitely a tendency to be a bit reckless here and just look at the grand and cool things. And then I'm just thinking, very easily, like, you're having fun. Maybe you're like, I'm not going to use protection. And then all of a sudden there is a disease, a real disease, and what are you going to do about it now? Because Saturn restricts, and then you're like, okay, wait, I can't actually just sleep with anybody or everybody. Like there needs to be measures here to protect myself, or like I've taken things too far and these are the consequences I'm now facing. That's very real. So I just want to add there, like not to be a party pooper, but like just, think about these things, especially because with Sages, they're also going to have Uranus in their seventh house. So there's a big energy of, meeting new interesting people in your life. But do just be mindful, especially also with Neptune there, like things might be better than they seem, but then actually it's like, no, it's actually not as good as it looks like on paper. Um, like the good old, I don't know, I've never experienced that, but just like the from other people, like, like you go home with somebody and you wake up and you're like, oh, they don't look like the way that I remembered them when I was feeling great at the party last night or something like that. So, these are just things to most definitely think about. There might also be like creativity blocks that you're facing in like how you are creating. That was a lot of the I'm just coming from like a fifth house Saturn transit. A lot of it for me was like facing a lot of like limitations around my creativity and feeling like restricted in how I can do that. And also generally in like dating, and I basically have practically not dated at all during that transit, or just found it very difficult to do so. Um, so that's what I can say here. At the same time, if I did choose to engage with like creativity, there was also like, if there's a block, there's always an opportunity to like overcome that. And every time I did that, I definitely like learned and matured. And that can also be the invitation here. And it's just like it can make you do more realistic things. Like, because you could easily fall into the trap of being like a starving artist, and Saturn in Aries is like, okay, like you can be an artist, but just like what can you actually do to make this a lifestyle that is, like not ruining you have to live at the existential brink or something. Like what can you actually do to make this a sustainable thing for you? So I think that's yeah, something we can add there. Or just again, like being more like taking more responsibility to be committed to your hobbies. Again, as you said, like maybe, don't go partying so hard and commit that creativity into like actually doing something um creative. And you also mentioned children. Again, it's I guess we just have to say it here, just because Saturn is like mythologically, Saturn ate his children, right? Usually, fifth house transits aren't the best time to get children, especially, or like pregnancies, I guess, especially if it's a fallen Saturn. I could just see things like being difficult. Like if you are in a pregnancy, things could, like there could be setbacks. Things might not go as planned. You might get rushed into hospital on an emergency, things like that. So I'm not saying you should, under no circumstance, get children. There's obviously other aspects we would have to take into consideration. But I do think it's something to like mention here. Just if it is something you are considering in your life, it might be a harsher time, or you might deal with some setbacks or difficulties if you are trying to get pregnant or are having a pregnancy during that time.
Yes.
That's
Yeah,
what I
if
think.
you're struggling with creativity, do the artist way. Or,
Yes.
like find a workbook or like something to help you work through it. Performance anxiety is also like fifth house thing. Um, yeah. I think
Good.
that's
I
pretty
think I
good.
think I started I'm not sure exactly, but I think I started the artist way like just around when Saturn ingressed into Pisces in my fifth house.
That
So,
makes sense.
so yeah, it makes total sense. So here's my tip for y'all Sag risings.
All right.
Oh, Capricorn. Capricornies. No, they're gonna get offended. No, just Capricorn Sun and Rising. So much love for you. I have my fair share of Capricorn placements, so I love Capricorn. Um, so Saturn in Aries is going to be in your fourth house. Again, we're meeting an angular place here, and it's in square to your ascendant, to your first house. So there might be a bit more tension that is created here, especially when it comes to fourth house teams would have fourth house themes that have to do with your upbringing, where you come from, where you're living, your family, your ancestry, the land you were born under or are living with at right now, in like who, what how did all of that shape me essentially? Like, how did I become the person that I became through my upbringing? Um, it's like Saturn, because the fourth house is like a foundation. So there is like a whole new foundation that is created or like being created here while Saturn is traveling through your fourth. It's laying like a whole new groundwork from which you can work on. So it might be disruptive at first, but something that benefits you later on. If I can also go like talk back at my fourth house, like Saturn through Aquarius was going through my fourth house, is it really laid a whole new foundation for me. It wasn't more mental for me, which makes sense since Aquarius is an air sign. But like every time I look back at that time, I'm like, yes, like this time is the time that shaped me that I can like always come back on, which like laid the foundation for like safety and how I go on about life and all of that. So why is Saturn important for you Capricorns? It's also important because it is your ruler. So whatever Saturn is doing, it's always important for you because it rules your ascendant. It's your ruling planet. And so traveling through the fourth house, it might confront you with, maybe some like childhood wounds or traumas of like where did you grow up too fast? Where did you have to take on too much responsibility? I mean, you're usually assigned at even besides Saturn and Aries, usually takes on a lot of responsibility. But now you might, for the first time, be really facing where does the core come from? Is it something that has been visible in my ancestry for a long time? Like, what made me into the person that I am today? And this is really that dichotomy of like fourth house, first house, square here that we are seeing. Um, Fourth house has also to do with our mortality. That doesn't mean there necessarily has to be a death here or anything like that. Oftentimes, fourth house can also speak of things in a metaphorical way, but this can mean that you are facing mortality in a literal or a metaphorical way with maybe your family or something shifting there. Um, or like again, it might be another health scare or something that comes up in relation to maybe diseases or things that have been running in the family. And you're like, oh, if I continue doing that, I'll end up just like my father or my mother or some other relative. And really like kind of facing that. And there's also an opportunity here to like develop a new sense of belonging, and being like maybe if you are not happy with the way that you have been raised or where you come from, like taking back your power and being like, no, I'm laying a new foundation for myself now. Like I'm creating my life. This is a new foundation. I'm setting a new groundwork I'm laying. And yeah, also because in a more like tangible way, the fourth house also can literally just rule our physical house where we are living in. So it might be a time where you know you could move, even though this might come with like setbacks, or things might not be realized the way you want them to. Like maybe you actually want to like buy a new house or like build a new house. So there you might be faced with some like setbacks or issues and like how fast you, or like how not fast, I guess, you can do this whole process. Um, Again, Saturn might also be your family members, so they might take on like a Saturnian role. You might feel like more distant from them or cut off, and like needing to put in more effort to like connect with them in some sort of way. Or also you could be again taking back your power and being like, no, I'm gonna set real tangible boundaries with my family. Like I want to go no contact with them for whatever reason. These are all also things that might happen. And again, it's things like moving to a new place. Um, Again, might also just come with like some difficulties, or like maybe you see a house and like you buy it, but then afterwards you realize like, oh, actually it's not how it was on paper. Like things aren't as great as they seem to be. There are just, I guess that's to be more careful of, especially because Neptune is there as well. So that's what I have to say right now. What do you have to say, Aid?
Yeah, I think you covered a lot. Saturn is also connection to land and like where you physically reside. So, there might be like you need to do some home renovations or make some changes in your home environment. Um, and that could take more time um to fix. It could be like undergoing, yeah, big home renovation project or uh literally like farming. Maybe you're picking up like farming, and learning to work with the limitations of the land because again, that's like Saturn. And Capricorn likes to get things done. It's a cardinal sign. It's like I have this idea and I need to, execute it. And Saturn and Aries is like, that takes time. Like you might have these grand ambitions for what you want, but it takes time to build those things. So, fourth house is foundation, like literally taking time to build a foundation. It takes years. It doesn't take days or weeks or months. Um, and yeah, I think it'll be really productive for Saturn, for Capricorn, because you're ruled by Saturn, so it's squaring you, so this is a productive aspect. But definitely like patience is going to be a big lesson. Um, and yeah, I think you covered a lot when it comes to like family things. Yeah, that's all I have to say. Anything
Straight
else?
to the point, just like Capricorn likes it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I
basically.
guess. Oh wait, one thing that I'm just seeing here at the notes, like limitations with ethnic or cultural lineages. I think that's like something I could just like end, um, or put here at the end, just like if you're facing again, maybe you got displaced, or like you didn't, like your lineage is from a different country, but you grew up in a completely different continent or country or whatever. It might be a time where you're like, I actually like want to grapple with that, like with my ethnicity, where I'm really coming from, or seeing like maybe some shortcomings, or just like, like if you go back and dig into your ancestry, because that's what I did when Saturn was traveling through my fourth house. I did like a whole family tree, and it was interesting. Like you get to see a lot of patterns and things, and there's also I don't live like super far away from where my roots are from, but I did not grow up in the land from where my roots are from. And it was a time where I really wanted to reconnect back to my like lineage and the traditions of like where I'm coming from. Like suddenly I got this urgent interest to do that, which I didn't have like ever before. So that's also what Saturn in the fourth sometimes can do, just like pique that curiosity. Or again, also just like, be aware, because Saturn in Aquarius is a different energy than Saturn in Aries, or just like realize like maybe the shortcomings and the struggles that your ancestors had to live and go through, and like how it shaped your ancestry, or maybe like even the reason why. like maybe there was a war or something, right? Not for all, for many of our ancestors, which is the reason why they moved countries and all of that. So that's, I think, just something that like came up here as well.
Great. Cool. I think
Great.
that's plenty for
Yes.
Capricorn. And now we'll move to Aquarius, Sun and Risings. Saturn will be in your third house, and third house is the house of communication. Who and how you speak and communicate, who you're in touch with, your relationship to your phone, to your car, to your neighborhood, just how you keep in touch with people and how you express yourself and your ideas. And so, Saturn there might bring some challenges in that area. Um, if you it might create some blockages in like the way you express yourself and the way you express your ideas, maybe being a little bit more developing a more clear or like crystallizing um like the way you communicate to people. Like, how accessible are you? Are you always like, constantly texting and constantly making people like text you, expecting people to text you back? Saturn in the third house is like, no, I'm actually creating more boundaries with like who I'm in communication with and what my communication style is. It's being more honest and truthful with your words. If you've been yeah, just learning to like be more honest in your day-to-day communications. Um, let's see. It's also like the kind of like media that you consume, like on the internet. So like just becoming more aware of like how like what you are consuming like informs your attention, like your mind, your literal like psychology, um, and like your mental habits and the way you think about like yourself and how maybe like how things might be contributing to like your anxiety, and just removing like excess stimuli and things and distractions, mental distractions that are blurring your consciousness and like your mental agility, basically. Um, you might feel, um, let's see. Yeah, just like you have a little bit like of a weakened voice, and maybe you're learning to develop more confidence in your voice and your writing and your speaking. Maybe developing a more disciplined writing practice, saying, okay, I'm going to like start journaling every day as a way to get in touch with like your mind and like put your thoughts somewhere, like outside of your mind and not just keep them all up in here. Um, there's a lot of things that fall under the third house. It's also neighbors. So you might have some challenges with neighbors. Just something to keep in mind. Um, it's also like local transportation. So cars, and like your like daily commutes. So you might, maybe something about your commute or method of transportation like gets slowed down, or maybe your work commute suddenly becomes longer or harder, um and you just need to like put in more effort just to like be mobile and get around. But that, even in that, like that slowing down, like maybe you're not able to physically move around as fast, but you're able to like take in your environment more and actually like have a stronger relationship and awareness of your neighborhood. Third house is like your neighborhood and the people that live around you. So, by having less freedom, mobile freedom, you actually can appreciate like your immediate surroundings better. Um, and yeah, creating like a stronger filter for like what your beliefs and ideas are versus those of other people. It like is like this is this like conversation or um this thing, like is it something that's like I'm actually interested in, or is it just like excess stimuli? Third house is also skills, like hard skills that you have, whether it's like um, coding or building things and using your hands, anything that's using your hands. Um, and it's very like tactile. Um, Even like certain art forms that are very tedious and require a lot of use of your hands. Saturn in the third house can be you like learning, becoming more dedicated to a specific craft or a skill or developing the yeah, like dedicating more energy and time and effort to learning new skills. And uh Yeah, that's all I have to say, I think. Third house is so much, but are there anything
It
other things
is,
that you can
yeah.
think of? Siblings. Third house is siblings. So
True.
maybe like um a sibling might you might feel a little bit cut off or separate from siblings and like you have to put in more effort to rekindle those connections. Um yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, yeah, or it might be like that. Your siblings, if you have any, are being like that Saturnian figure in some sort of way, like they're putting restrictions upon you or something like that. Especially if you have like a sibling that lives nearby you or like with you or some sort of way. It might be also a time where you feel like or you might really grapple with like, am I in the right environment? Like, is this the right vicinity that I'm living at? Are my needs like really getting met here? Can I like fully be myself? Like, you might feel like really restricted by like maybe you're living in a small town or something, and you're just like, oh, everyone's so close-minded here. I need more freedom or something like that. Which then creates you moving to some different place again where you can express yourself better. There's definitely an aspect of self-expression here, especially because you're also a Saturn ruled sign. Aquarius is right, like Saturn is your ruler. So the third house is also, or at least Saturn traveling through your third house is linked to yourself, to your first house as well. And whatever Saturn is doing is always going to be in some sort of way important to you or how you are being out there in the world. And so you might, or there might be some sort of, depending on what neighbors, if you have neighbors, there might be some like maybe issues that you run into with neighbors. Things are not communicated clearly. Or you get new neighbors and they're like they seem very restrictive and weird and they're like no, like actually like we don't like these rules around here, we want to change them. Things like that, like you might run into some like hardships or setbacks when it comes to just like your local environment where you're living in. The third house is your like fish tank environment, so like the fourth house is like literally your house. Third house is everything that's happening like around your house. Yeah, there might also be a time where you're like, oh, I actually want to join some sort of local organization or organize things more. Like maybe you're sick and tired of how things are, so like you're like, I'm gonna take the lead. I'm gonna volunteer or run as the I don't know, like for like a grassroots political organization where I'm at in this town where I'm living. Like I want to organize and do things. And the third house actually also has a lot to do with our daily rituals, to the things we do that are good for ourselves. Like I don't know, maybe you light a candle or put some essential oils every night before you go to bed. Like that's a third house sort of ritual. Or just like things we do on our daily commutes. I feel like the third house can give us a lot of insight into what we need to kind of like keep us sane, if I can put it in that way. And so, like a fiery Martian third house would be something, or like my suggestion would be like, oh, maybe you need some like action. Like maybe you need to go to, I don't know, some martial arts class, that type of thing every week. And that's also how you connect to your local community in a way that is beneficial, or just like connecting more to that fire element. Especially if your chart is doesn't have a lot of fire. connect, like lighting a candle and staring into that flame might really be something that can connect you to that like fire element if it's lacking or it feels restricting in your life. Like just like the daily rituals you can do to like make your life better. That's what comes to my mind here.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. The one more thing came to mind for me, which was like marketing and promotion, how you get your ideas out there. So maybe you're like putting in more effort to on like how you're marketing yourself. Um, outreach. Maybe
Mhm.
you're like, dotting all your I's and crossing all your T's when it comes to like the words and the language that you're using. Um, yeah,
Yeah, that's good.
great. Okay. All right. Last but not least.
Yeah, I swear, Pisces always last but not least. Uh,
Not least.
yeah, exactly. No, but like, yeah, I'm first of all, I'm excited for your Pisces risings because if we're talking about Pisces and Aries, we're obviously talking about Saturn moving outside of your first house. So you've
Woohoo!
had a long ass transit of Saturn through your first, I mean, even Neptune traveling through your first house for the past 14 years. So there is like a big release moment going on in general for you Pisces risings. And it has a lot to do with like just like in a way you created a whole new foundation probably for yourself and how you're out there in the world. Saturn, your first house might have really restricted you in like just how you're showing up or your ability or like some sort of setbacks and all of that. And Neptune might have like kind of blurred the lines a bit in that way. And it almost feels like actually now you can step into like a more bolder and louder version of yourself. Um, and the second house, for me, always feels like an interesting extension of the first house, where it's like, okay, the first house is about you. The second house is about like your talents and abilities and the things you kind of accumulate over your lifetime that make you out, that like become part of yourself. Um, but it's like usually things you're like working towards, and oftentimes that's why the second house also has to do with like our finances. Often the talents that we accumulate over life are the things we end up making money from, and so for y'all Pisces rising, this is a time to just really be like kind of actually take yourselves seriously and be like, hey, that is actually something I'm very good at. Maybe I can make money off of that. Like maybe this can actually turn into some sort of career or something I can live off. But it requires you to like take yourself seriously first, and like don't ignore the things you're good at or maybe better at or excel at than other people. You sometimes like, you Pisces risings, you're too generous. Like you're not giving yourself the credit that you deserve. And like Saturn in the second house is like start respecting that like your values more, like you can actually do things without them, like don't ignore that. And really kind of like setting you up to like actually take that responsibility more and be like, oh, like I actually can make money off of that. Like I actually can create some sort of business of some sort of talents and knowledge and wisdom I gained over my life. And it's just I think Saturn in the second is overall like just setting higher standards for yourself and also how others treat you, right? Because if you get your values, which is also second house theme, in check, then like it's easier for other people to know how to treat you if you know how to treat yourself and take yourself more seriously. But like you have to just set these values yourself first. Like if you don't believe in them, if you don't believe they're worthy, it's going to be hard for other people to take them seriously. So that's just what or like you Pisces risings need to be aware of during that time. And I mean, there's two things that can happen. With Saturn in the second, obviously the opposite can happen as well, and like something um harsh or horrible. Like there might be some financial setbacks that come into your life where like there's a big loan you all of a sudden have to pay off. maybe because of an impulsive or rash decision that you've made, that's very like Saturn and Aries, like you're facing the consequences of like something you decided on a whim, and now you're like, oh, okay, but now I have to like pay this off for a long time, or like, damn, like now I actually kind of have to live frugally for a while because I need to really get my finances and money in check. At the same time, it's also an opportunity to get your finances and money in check and maybe set up these I don't know, like monthly bills or something that is just like paying off your debt or anything like in a consistent way, or like, or like doing a savings account. Maybe you don't have any debts, but just like taking this more seriously, like maybe getting into investing, or just like what can you do with your money? Like how can you take responsibility for your financial situation in the long run, which is essentially what a lot of like investing or saving has to do. You're not getting the benefits immediately. You're seeing the benefits of what you've invested in like 10 years or something like that. But you can start creating that base now during that Saturn and Aries transit. It's probably not going to be so easy because, again, Saturn and Aries is in its fall. You might get like, impatient here, but I really urge you to not like, don't take that again, like that metaphorical turkey too fast out of the oven. Like, it won't taste good. Let it simmer. And, yeah, it might also be a time where you become more disciplined with your diet. Again, the second house is kind of an extension of the first house, so it has a lot to do with like the things that you accumulate and take in, which is like food in a way, but also like the things you consume, which might be is not just food, it might be the conversations that you're having, the people you're hanging out with. Like be wise with how you are spending your time TM, which is Saturn, because it can impact you really good or bad in the long run. Um, yeah, that's what I have here. What do you want to add?
Yeah, I think so. Pisces, we mentioned this at the beginning, but because Saturn is going back into Pisces in September through February of next year,
This year.
there
Oh, I
February
mean,
next
yeah,
year.
this year, but that February next year.
Yeah. Um, this will be like Saturn in your second house will be a preview, but we will go back to that Saturn and Pisces energy. So there are some final um strings and knots that need to get retied in when it comes to like your physical health and Saturn over the past couple of years potentially feeling like very restricted. If you've been dealing with any health challenges, lack of energy, lack of motivation, um, uh, that there's still like opportunity to go back and like make adjustments accordingly. But thinking of the second house is like, those are all first house topics. Now thinking of the second house is everything that you need to support the first house, support your physical body and your vitality. It's like everything that you consume, um, like you said, like diet, like what are you consuming, that is making you feel heavier or slower or like weighed down, and how can you consume in a more, conscious and intentional way? Saturn is intentionality, and caution, and being more deliberate and selective with the things that you're putting in your body, whether it's food, whether it's um, vitamins, like anything that you're putting in. Um, and and also being maybe potentially frugal with like what do you actually need, like if you've been overindulging in certain not just with food but also with money, or acting impulsively with money because Aries rules your second house. Maybe you spend and consume very quickly and impulsively, and Saturn in your second house is asking you to slow down and consume less like on a whim and actually think about the consequences of like whenever you act on those urges. Um, but this is all like when I think about Saturn, the second going through your second house, like this is gonna make you feel so much lighter, I feel like it's gonna make you feel just like less weighed down and like especially after Saturn was in your first house for so long, like this is really gonna like clear out like anything that's been, Pisces is an emotional sponge. You hold on to a lot. And Saturn is like trying to like flush out like everything that you don't need to hold on to. And so Saturn in the second house is going to be like, okay, and now that you're not holding on to these things, like you actually need less to like support yourself. You don't need all these things. Um, and that can be very freeing. So, um, yeah, I don't know if you have anything else, Mia, but
Yeah, no,
um
that's great. Yeah, I was just thinking of that. Like it's probably a good time to maybe also do like some sorting out, because the second house is also about like our material possessions. I was just really going through like what do I need, what do I don't need. And maybe now that you have maybe a bit less of emotional attachment, and I'm not saying that emotional attachment is wrong at all. But just, many things we maybe don't need, and it can be a cathartic thing to release that, maybe like even burn it. I did that, not necessarily in my second house Saturn transit, but I did go and like just took some things in that case that were related to like an ex, and I was just like, I'm gonna burn that, like I'm gonna do a ritual out of that, and that was very freeing and cathartic of me. So that could be, potentially something that you can do, like a cathartic burning down release, or also, you can also just like write things on paper and like burn that paper or something like that. But just again, as you said, I feel like there's a big potential of just feeling even more lighter. And then when you make room for that, you can actually take more responsibility for the things you then want to bring out into the world. Because again, I feel like the second house just has a lot to do with like our time, how we spend our time, as well. Saturn in essence is rules over time. So it's like, what are you investing your time in? Like, are you investing it in like gaining the talents and abilities that will serve you and like in the long run? Or are you, wasting it by, I don't know, shopping to fill some sort of inner void or whatever? Um, so that's like just things you're probably like going to kind of grapple with. But I do think it's a very good opportunity to get rid of the unnecessary junk. So yeah, that's what we have for Pisces, I guess. Unless something popped into your head on a whim.
I think you covered it. I think
Yay.
we did the thing.
With the Saturn thing. Yeah, it's been long. I don't know how long this is gonna be. I think it's gonna be like 2 hours or something, 2.5 hours.
At least, yeah.
So I definitely hope we could, bring this transit, make it a bit more tangible, just so you know what you can kind of look out for. These are all general horoscopes. Many things depend on personal placements, transits, timing techniques, which profection year are you in? Which is, the reason why you should get a professional astrology reading if you want like a real deep dive. Because not every Pisces rising is gonna obviously feel the same or go through exactly the same, but there is like a common theme of the second house that is real for all the Pisces risings. So that's just what I want to mention, to like close it off. But otherwise, I hope we covered these topics well, and you can just have a bit more clarity on how this transit is going to affect you. And yeah, kind of like have a bigger picture on like how to maybe integrate that. And again, just a reminder, Saturn is takes a longer time to develop things, so mastery comes over time. Just as right now Saturn is at 29 degrees of Pisces right now. So we're feeling these like kind of closing lessons of what Saturn has brought into our lives ever since Saturn moved into Pisces, which was around March 7th, 2023. Yeah, that's a better view. So and that's also going to happen with Saturn and Aries, but we're just at the beginning of it now, and it's a long time. And oftentimes, when there are planets that are in signs for a long time, like we forget, like we got so used to Saturn and Pisces that maybe we're gonna like when Saturn moves into Aries, we're gonna have like more of a clarity on what Saturn and Pisces actually was about before we know exactly what Saturn and Aries is even doing in our charts. So, yeah, I just encourage you to be compassionate with yourself through the new set of lessons that we are all gonna go through, and yeah, like stay consistent, as Saturn would say, I guess.
Yeah, I can't think of a time when I regretted a transit, like, or wish a Saturn transit went differently. Like when I look back at
Yeah.
every Saturn transit, I just think I'm so glad that I stuck it through, because I wouldn't be here where I am now without like that effort and that patience and that trust. And if there's one thing that Saturn teaches, it's trust. It's like it doesn't
Yeah.
feel great now. The challenges like on the surface might look ugly and might look challenging, but the payoff is so worth it. Saturn always rewards hard work and patience. So, um, it's definitely not anything to fear. And I believe we both offer readings, right? So if you would like a more deep dive into how it's going to personally affect you, um, and other planets in your chart, it's going to feel very differently for everyone. Um, we can both offer more insight, but yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you, Mia, for having me. This is very fun. Hope I could take some of the weight off of such a tedious task. So Saturnian, going through every
It is,
sign,
yeah.
giving every sign good attention, but I think we did a good job. I'm happy with how this came out.
Yeah, I'm super happy too. It's definitely easier doing it together instead of alone. Like, covering horoscopes takes a lot of time and effort, and we've been, sitting here for like 2 hours. So again, also just like, if you've appreciated this, if you've learned anything from this or gained any insight, I highly encourage you to just like this video. It sincerely helps out more than you know. Gets it to people that might benefit from it as well. If you know any sort of people in your personal life that might benefit from this, like send them this video, like share this video, or also just leave a comment. Like we're both always curious about what people are feeling. Like what is your experience now with how Saturn has been in your respective houses? Like how are you feeling now? We're saying goodbye to Saturn and Pisces. How is that for y'all? What are you looking forward or scared of Saturn and Aries? Um, I definitely always appreciate looking through the comments and answering back. I answer back to every comment, and if you're shy, like also send us a DM. Like we don't bite. Um, so yeah, with DMs, maybe Aid, where can we find you? Where can people find you?
Yes, you can find me. I have a website, retroaidastrology.com. That's RETROADE, astrology.com. I'm on Instagram, that's retro.aid. I have a YouTube channel. Um, and I do readings, I write monthly horoscopes. So that's also on my website, and you can sign up for those horoscopes there as well. And yeah, that's where I am. I'm mostly on Instagram, and TikTok sometimes, but we'll see.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, the links will all be down below. So if you want to check that out, I highly encourage you to go into the description box. And if you want to stay connected with me, again, you're on my YouTube channel, so might as well subscribe to it if you found it useful. Um, I'm also on Spotify. All the podcast type episodes are on Spotify, like solely. I mean, not solely, but just like on Spotify, I only release those. They are also on YouTube, but maybe maybe you don't like the video kind of type format. You just want to listen to it on Spotify. Like the House series is kind of coming to an end now. The 12th house is going to be released very soon, so if you want to check out the house, like if you just want to learn more about the houses, which we have covered here as well, like maybe you want to deep dive into a certain house, like I highly encourage you to just listen to the respective houses. You know, maybe Saturn is traveling to your through your eighth, so there's an amazing eighth house episode you can dive like fully into, like 1.5 hours of just talking about the eighth house. So, and again, I did the ninth house with eight, so so there's that as well. And I'm also on Instagram, Resonance Astrology, and I have a website also, Resonance Astrology. Um, Everything is Resonance Astrology here. So exactly. And all the links are also going to be down below. Is there any other closing words you want to add?
No, that's everything.
Okay, great. Well, then, we're going to leave you guys with that. I hope you enjoyed this video, and yeah, we're going to see you soon. Have a lovely Saturn and Aries transit. Bye.